That morning, my husband said he was leaving for a business trip. By evening, I baked an apple tart and took it to my best friend's apartment, hoping to surprise her. She'd been saying she felt lonely, but when I arrived, her door was slightly open. Before I could knock, I heard my husband's voice inside. "Once she signs, everything will belong to us." My friend whispered, "And if she finds out," he laughed, "by then it'll be too late." Then I heard one more sentence and my whole body went cold. "The baby will make everything legal once she signs. She can never come back." I'm glad you're here for this one. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. What are you doing while you listen? Working, cooking, or just taking a moment to yourself? I read. Everyone. Quick note, some details here are fictionalized for storytelling, but the heart of this story, the message, is what I hope stays with you. I hope. I stood in the hallway with the apple tart growing cold in my hands, staring through the crack in the door at a scene that rewrote 7 years of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. An hour earlier, I'd been in my Back Bay condo kitchen floor, dusting the granite countertops, the smell of butter and cinnamon filling the air. It had been one of those brutal October days at Kendrick and Associates, 3 client meetings, 2 portfolio reviews, and a conference call that ran 90 minutes over. At 55, I'd spent 3 decades managing investment portfolios worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, and some days the weight of other people's money felt heavier than it should. Baking helped. The precision of it, the way measurements mattered, the chemical reactions you could depend on. I pulled the tart from the oven and set it on the cooling rack, watching steam rise from the latticed crust. The scent of caramelized apples made me think of Anwin. Anwin Irvine had been my friend for 2 years or so, I'd believed. 32, bright-eyed, recently moved to Boston, and lonely in that way young professionals in new cities often are. She'd started coming to the investment seminars I occasionally taught at the community center. We'd struck up a friendship over coffee, then dinners, then the easy rhythm of women who genuinely enjoyed each other's company despite the age gap. She'd mentioned feeling isolated lately. I decided on impulse to bring her the tart. A small gesture. Comfort food. I didn't call ahead. I should have called ahead. The Commonwealth Avenue building was one of those renovated brownstones with buzzers that never work quite right, and hallways that smell like old carpet and someone else's dinner. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, the bakery box warm against my palms, already imagining Anwin's surprised smile. I raised my hand to knock and froze. The door was ajar. Not wide open, just a few inches, as if someone had pulled it nearly closed, but the latch hadn't quite caught. Light spilled through the gap, and voices. A man's laugh, low and comfortable. Brent's laugh. Brent Yates, my husband of 29 years, 45, and wearing the expensive Patek Philippe watch I'd bought him last Christmas, lounged on Anwin's cream-colored sofa as if he owned it. He held a crystal tumbler of whiskey, the expensive Japanese kind he always claimed to dislike when I ordered it at restaurants. Anwin Irvine, 32, and glowing in silk loungewear that clung to an unmistakably pregnant belly, rested one manicured hand on his shoulder. I didn't move. I'm not sure I breathed. "She'll never suspect," Brent said, swirling his whiskey. "She trusts you completely." Anwin's voice was warm, almost purring. "And the paperwork is ready? The LLC transfer? Signed and waiting. She thinks it's a tax optimization." He laughed again, that easy sound I'd heard across breakfast tables and dinner parties for 3 decades. "You know, Valerie, show her a spreadsheet and she stops asking questions." The bakery box was still warm in my hands. The hallway was silent except for the hum of a fluorescent light somewhere down the corridor. Through that gap in the door, I could see the framed photograph on Anwin's side table, the 3 of us at that charity gala last summer. Brent in his tuxedo, me in the navy dress I'd worn too many times, Anwin in something young and shimmering. We were smiling. We looked like friends. How long had I been the only one who didn't know? My investment training kicked in then, that cold, analytical mode that made me good at my job. I began cataloging evidence. The whiskey Yamazaki 18, approximately $200 a bottle. The apartment renovations I'd noticed but never questioned, probably $15,000 in upgrades over the past year. Anwen's silk loungewear La Perla, maybe $800. The ease between them wasn't new passion, it was domestic comfort, the kind that takes months to build. I did the math. How long a year longer? Anwen shifted on the sofa, her hand moving to her swollen belly in that unconscious gesture pregnant women make. That was the sentence that had frozen me. The baby will make everything legal once she signs. She can never come back. I had heard it. I had understood it, and I had not moved. I had heard it. I had understood it, and I had not moved. 6 months along, maybe 7. The timing would put conception at late March, early April. March, when Brent had told me he needed to travel more for his consulting work. When I'd started having dinner with Anwen twice a week because she'd seemed so lonely. God, how perfectly they'd played me. What about Bernice? Anwen asked. Is your mother on board? She's thrilled about the baby. That's all she cares about. Brent's voice carried that particular satisfaction he got when he'd maneuvered someone into position. Finally, a grandchild. She's already talking about trust funds. I had spent 30 years reading risk in numbers. I should have learned to read it in people. Anwen leaned into him, her voice dropping to something almost tender. And Valerie will never know the child isn't really yours. The hallway tilted, or maybe I did. The child isn't really yours. I stepped back from the door. My feet made no sound on the carpet, good quality carpet I noticed distantly recently installed. Someone was paying for upgrades. Someone was paying for a lot of things. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. The bakery box was still in my hands, though the warmth had faded. In the lobby, I set the apple tart on a side table next to a wilting fern. I placed it down with the same care I'd used to carry it, that habitual precision that governed my movements. Someone would find it. Someone would wonder who'd left a perfectly good dessert in a brownstone lobby. Outside October, rain had started. Cold rain, the kind that presages winter. I stood on the Commonwealth Avenue sidewalk, watching my breath cloud in the air. Rain hit my face, ran down my collar. I didn't move. People passed me, couples under umbrellas, students hunched against the weather. Behind me, 3 floors up, my husband and my best friend were planning my financial execution in an apartment I would never enter again. I looked down at my hands. They were empty. I must have set down the bakery box without noticing. The rain was cold. My face was wet. I wasn't crying. That fact frightened me more than anything I'd seen through that door. I turned toward home. I had work to do. But I am telling this out of order. Standing on that sidewalk in the October rain, I had already been in that hallway for 11 minutes before I moved. 11 minutes I counted in real time because every word they spoke was a line item in the case I was already building. Brent shifted on the sofa, ice clinking in his glass. Through the gap in the door, I watched him gesture with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Yates Family Holdings, LLC, he said. I've been routing her bonuses there since March of last year. She never checks the fine print. March of last year. 18 months. My quarterly bonuses from Kendrick and Associates, the rewards for bringing in high net worth clients, for growing portfolios, for the 80-hour weeks I'd logged while he'd been planning this. Anwen leaned forward, her pregnant belly shifting beneath the silk. She held papers, real documents, not theoretical plans. $340,000 so far. Once she signs this transfer, the portfolio follows another $2.8 million. $340,000. My bonuses, my work, 18 months of theft dressed up as tax optimization. She built it, Brent said, laughing. We inherit it. That's marriage. The fluorescent light hummed above me. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured through thin walls. I pressed my back against the corridor, the bakery box long forgotten on some lobby table. My phone was in my pocket. I could have called the police, a lawyer, anyone. Instead, I listened. Because rage without information is just noise, and I'd spent 30 years turning information into power. 3 decades of portfolio management. I know a hostile takeover when I hear one. Anwen's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, smiled. Your mother. Should I answer? Brent nodded. Put her on speaker. The voice that emerged was instantly recognizable, Bernice Yates, 68, and living off the monthly checks I'd sent for 7 years, because Brent had convinced me his mother needed help with expenses. Rent utilities, the comfortable retirement she'd claimed to deserve after raising him alone. Darling. Bernice's voice carried that particular tone of someone accustomed to being indulged. Have you kept her properly guilty about the baby situation? A woman with no children is easy to control. The hallway tilted. Or maybe I did again. Brent's response was casual, practiced. She's been taking those fertility supplements for 3 years. Complete waste of money, but it keeps her distracted. 3 years. 3 years of vitamins, acupuncture, that humiliating fertility specialist appointment where they'd suggested the problem might be stress, might be age, might be some fundamental inadequacy in my aging body. 3 years of Bernice's pointed comments at holiday dinners, still no grandchildren. 3 years of performance. Good, Bernice said. I'll play the supportive mother-in-law at the signing. No one questions Grandma's signature. Anwen laughed, a sound I'd heard dozens of times, over coffee, over wine, over those dinners where she'd confided about her loneliness, and I'd offered friendship like a fool offering her throat to wolves. The notary's scheduled for Thursday, Anwen said. Valerie thinks it's estate planning. Very responsible, very sensible, very her. Has she asked about the pregnancy? Bernice's voice sharpened with interest. Not once. Brent sounded almost disappointed. Too polite to pry, too grateful that someone finally wants to be her friend. The woman I'd sent a monthly check to for 7 years' rent utilities, the designer handbag she was probably clutching right now, had been sharpening her cruelty like a blade. Anwen shifted, her voice changing. I need the bathroom. This baby's sitting on my bladder. I had seconds. I moved. Not toward the elevator, too exposed, too slow. The stairwell door was 15 feet down the corridor, marked with fading exit letters. I reached it as I heard Anwen's apartment door open wider. Her footsteps heading toward the bathroom. The stairwell was concrete and cold. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. I descended 17 floors, my footfalls echoing in the narrow space. My breath came steady, controlled. 30 years of managing other people's crises had taught me one thing. Control your response, and you control the outcome. You calculate, loss assess, damage plan, recovery. By the 14th floor, I'd cataloged every detail. Yates Family Holdings, LLC, 18 months, $340,000 stolen. Portfolio transfer pending $2.8 million at risk. Bernice complicit. Anwen pregnant with a child that wasn't Brent's. Signing scheduled for Thursday, 3 days from now. By the 7th floor, I'd outlined my next moves, secure the assets, document the fraud find, legal representation that Brent wouldn't anticipate. By the ground floor, the grief had crystallized into something harder, colder, infinitely more useful. I emerged onto Commonwealth Avenue. The rain had intensified, turning the sidewalk into a mirror of streetlights and neon. October in Boston smells like wet leaves, and approaching winter like endings. I started walking. 12 blocks to my building, 12 blocks through rain that soaked through my coat, ran down my collar, turned my hair to wet strings against my neck. People hurried past with umbrellas. A couple laughed under an awning, waiting out the weather. Normal people having normal evenings, unaware that 3 blocks north, their financial planner was being systematically dismantled. My mind shifted into the mode I used for portfolio analysis. Asset inventory, the Back Bay condo purchased before the marriage, protected by the prenuptial agreement Brent had signed 29 years ago. Investment portfolio at Kendrick, $2.8 million, accumulated through my salary and bonuses, marital property vulnerable. The mysterious LLC, $340,000 of my money already gone. Retirement accounts joint checking the Charleston Beach house we'd bought 5 years ago. Evidence needed bank statements, LLC formation documents, email correspondence, phone records. Timeline of the affair. Medical records had Brent even tried to have children, or had that been another manipulation? Legal strategy, divorce attorney, private investigator, forensic accountant. Move fast but quiet. Strike before Thursday's signing. By the time I reached my building, I wasn't the woman who'd left carrying an apple tart. That woman had trusted. This one calculated. The lobby was empty marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. I stood under the awning, rain dripping from my coat onto marble. My phone buzzed Brent, texting that he'd be stuck in traffic home late. I looked at the screen, deleted the message, unlocked my door. The condo was dark and blessedly silent. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to my home office, opened my laptop, and created a new encrypted folder. I titled it Project Clean Slate. By Tuesday morning, Project Clean Slate had 17 documents and a 3-page action plan. I placed 3 items on Vernon Marsh's desk at 9:15, a flash drive containing 7 years of financial records, a sealed envelope with $50,000 cash, and a typed list of 11 questions that required answers within 14 days. Vernon Marsh, 54, and carrying 2 decades of detective work in his careful, observant manner, accepted the retainer envelope without ceremony. His office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in downtown Boston, exposed brick, reinforced locks, the kind of space that valued discretion over aesthetics. Rain streaked the windows behind him. The coffee he'd offered sat untouched on the corner of his desk, growing cold. "Walk me through it," he said. I did. Clinically. The unlatched door, the overheard conspiracy, the hidden LLC draining my bonuses for 18 months. The pregnancy that wasn't Brent's. Bernice's calculated manipulation. The signing scheduled for early November, a fraud waiting for my signature. Vernon took notes in shorthand, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. His pen moved with practiced efficiency across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he studied the 11-question list. "Number 7, he said, tapping the paper. "How did Anwin's husband really die in 2019? You think there's something there. I think there's always something there when a 32-year-old widow shows this little grief." He smiled, a quick flash that suggested appreciation. "Number 8, trace all LLC formations and financial transfers. You've already pulled preliminary records." I gestured to the flash drive. 7 years. Every bonus, every tax document, every suspicious transaction I can access without triggering alerts. It's organized by fiscal quarter. Vernon looked at me with something approaching respect. "Mrs. Yates, in 20 years, I've never had a client show up this prepared. What do you do for a living?" "I manage investment portfolios, $40 million under advisement." "That explains it." He pulled the flash drive toward him. "I'll need 3 days to map the LLC structure. Another week for surveillance patterns, where he goes, when he says he's working late, how often they meet, whether there are others involved." "Others?" "Fraud this organized usually has more players. Accountants, lawyers who don't ask questions, people who facilitate." The October rain intensified, drumming against the windows. Somewhere below, traffic honked and stalled. Normal people having normal Tuesdays. When had I stopped trusting my instincts and started trusting his explanations? "Timeline," I asked. "Preliminary report in 7 days. Full workup in 14. Surveillance photos. Financial forensics background checks on everyone in the conspiracy. I'll coordinate directly with your attorney. You've retained counsel. Meeting her at 11:30. Vernon nodded approval. "Good. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. And Mrs. Yates." He met my eyes. "Whatever you're feeling right now, don't let it show at home. The best evidence comes from subjects who think they're still winning. I've had 48 hours of practice. Then you're already better at this than most." Denise Shelby's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower in the financial district. Her assistant, a young man with efficient politeness, escorted me past walls lined with framed verdicts and settlement agreements. Trophies of victories, won fortunes, protected lives, legally disentangled. Denise Shelby, 51, with 3 decades of courtroom victories, etched in her unflinching gaze, spread the prenuptial agreement across her glass desk. The document was 23 pages bound in navy leather, signed 29 years ago, the week before our wedding, when Brent had suggested we protect our partnership. I'd written most of it myself, actually. Investment management teaches you that trust is lovely, but contracts are eternal. Denise read in silence for 11 minutes. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something sharper. When she looked up, she was smiling. Section 14, she said. Forfeiture of all marital assets upon documented infidelity. You wrote this yourself, didn't you? 7 years ago, I managed a hostile merger. I learned to protect what's mine. This is ironclad. Better than 90% of prenuptial agreements I see. She turned pages, pointing to specific clauses. Look, you defined marital assets to exclude anything acquired before marriage or through your independent income. Your investment portfolio protected. The Back Bay condo, yours outright. He signed acknowledgement that his income contributions were proportionally minimal. The relief was physical warmth spreading through my chest after 48 hours of cold. But, Denise continued, enforcement requires evidence. Photographic documentation of the affair, financial records proving the LLC fraud, and ideally biological proof if that baby isn't his, we need laboratory confirmation. I have a private investigator starting surveillance today. Vernon Marsh. You know him. We've worked 6 cases together. He's thorough. She made notes on a yellow pad that matched Vernon's. We'll need to move fast but quietly. File for divorce after we've secured evidence, but before he realizes you know. I'll prepare emergency asset freeze motions the moment we file. We lock down every account, every property, every asset he might try to hide. He mentioned early November for the document signing. Then we have 3 weeks to build an airtight case. Denise's smile was sharp enough to cut. We'll need photographic evidence, financial records, and ideally biological proof. Can you obtain a DNA sample without his knowledge? His toothbrush, that works. By 12:15, we'd convened a conference call, me, Denise, and Vernon on speaker. Strategy aligned with military precision. Vernon would begin surveillance immediately focusing on LLC paper trails and Anwin's background. Denise would prepare emergency motions and review every clause of the prenuptial agreement for maximum leverage. How long before he expects you to sign his fraudulent transfer documents? Denise asked. He mentioned early November to Anwin. We have 3 weeks. 3 weeks is plenty, Vernon said through the speaker, his voice carrying quiet confidence. I'll have his entire life mapped by then. For the first time in 48 hours, my hands weren't shaking. I wrote 2 checks, one to Vernon's agency, one to Denise's firm, signed engagement letters with steady hands. The amounts were substantial, but irrelevant. You can't put a price on strategic advantage. Walking out into October sunshine, I felt something unexpected lightness, not happiness that would come later, if at all. But the crushing weight of carrying this alone had lifted. I had allies now, professionals, people who understood that betrayal required more than tears. It required evidence strategy and impeccable timing. My phone rang as I reached my car. Vernon. One more thing, Mrs. Yates. Question number 1 on your list, is your husband medically sterile? I'll need a DNA sample to run the paternity probability analysis. I looked at my reflection in the car window. 55 hair still damp from earlier rain, wearing the gray suit I'd chosen specifically because it suggested competence without aggression. I can have that to you by tomorrow morning. The line went quiet for a beat. You already know, don't you? Vernon said softly. I've suspected for 3 years, I said. Now I'm going to prove it. 3 days later, the prenuptial agreement I'd locked in our home safe 7 years ago sat on Denise's desk like a loaded gun I'd forgotten I owned. Friday morning, October 20th. Rain hammered the windows of Denise's 14th floor conference room. She'd spread the document across the glass table, 47 pages of legal language I'd drafted, in the careful, paranoid mindset of someone who'd just survived a hostile corporate merger. Back then, I'd been protecting assets. Now, I was deploying weapons. Denise traced her finger down page 32. Section 14, subsection B. The offending spouse forfeits all claim to joint assets and pays $240,000 in liquidated damages. Who drafted this language? I did. Brent signed it the week before our wedding. He never reads legal documents I put in front of him. She looked up something like awe in her expression. Mrs. Yates, I've handled 300 divorces. This is the most precise trap I've ever seen. You built this 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was managing a $20 million portfolio merger. The CEO's wife tried to claim assets during the negotiation. It collapsed the deal. I learned that day, protect what's yours before anyone thinks to take it. The liquidated damages clause is particularly elegant. Denise tapped the page. Not punitive, calculated, based on projected opportunity costs, lost earnings, potential reputational harm. A court will enforce this. That was the point. Section 14C gets better. The offending spouse shall bear all legal costs associated with dissolution proceedings, plus documented investigative expenses incurred in evidence gathering. You're not just protected, you're weaponized. The best defense is built long before you know you'll need it. I had learned that lesson once. I would not need to learn it again. Denise closed the document. We need proof, photographs, financial records, biological evidence. Once we have that, this prenup makes the divorce a formality. He signs, or we go to court where he loses everything publicly. Vernon's handling surveillance. I'm handling the DNA. Be careful. If he suspects, he won't. I've been performing normalcy for a week. I'm very good at my role. Denise smiled, sharp and approving. I believe you. Sunday morning, October 22nd, 5:15 a.m. The bedroom was dark except for the blue glow of Brent's phone charging on his nightstand. His breathing had the deep, even rhythm of someone sleeping soundly, unburdened by guilt or strategy. I slipped from bed, bare feet, silent on hardwood. The master bathroom door made no sound. I'd oiled the hinges. Thursday afternoon, while he was at work, along with the medicine cabinet, the shower door, every surface that might betray movement. The sterile evidence bag Vernon had given me sat in my makeup drawer tucked behind foundation compacts I rarely used. I removed it with hands that didn't shake. 30 years of managing crises had taught me one thing: execute the plan, don't let emotion compromise the position. Brent's electric toothbrush stood in its charger blue LED, indicating full battery. I lifted it, unscrewed the brush head, placed it in the evidence bag, sealed it. The replacement head identical model, worn to match his current usage pattern, slid on with a soft click. Behind me, Brent's breathing pattern changed. I froze. The evidence bag felt suddenly massive in my hand, impossible to hide. In the bedroom, bed sheets rustled. Footsteps would follow in seconds. The bathroom had nowhere to conceal anything, nowhere to... His breathing settled back into sleep rhythm. A dream, maybe. Or just the unconscious repositioning of someone comfortable in his deceptions. I tucked the evidence bag into my bathrobe pocket and returned to bed. Lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe, feeling the weight of stolen DNA samples pressing against my hip. When my alarm went off at 6:30, I rose with practiced normalcy and went to make his breakfast. 7:30. Sunday morning light filtered through the kitchen windows. I'd made his usual scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee exactly the way he preferred it, strong enough to taste bitter. He sat at the island reading something on his tablet, wearing the gray cashmere robe I'd given him last Christmas. The restructuring paperwork should be finalized by early November, he said, not looking up. Simple signature then were optimized for the new tax year. I placed his plate in front of him with the gesture I'd performed 1,000 times. Whatever you think is best. You've always been better with these complicated structures. He smiled, genuine warmth or the performance of it. After 29 years, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. That's why we make a good team. He kissed my forehead like he had 1,000 mornings before I felt nothing but the cool weight of the evidence bag in my purse. I have a client meeting this morning, I said. Should be back by 11. Sunday meeting. Portfolio emergency. Market volatility has everyone nervous. He nodded already back to his tablet. That's my workaholic wife. I drove to Vernon's office through empty Sunday morning streets. Downtown Boston on a weekend has a strange quiet. All those buildings full of weekday ambition sitting silent. Vernon's warehouse office was locked, but he'd given me the entry code. Third floor, exposed brick, the smell of old coffee and printer toner. He took the sealed evidence bag with gloved hands, placed it in a larger shipping container already labeled for the lab. Full genetic panel, he confirmed. Paternity probability analysis plus reproductive viability markers, 7 to 10 business days. So, by early November, we'll have scientific confirmation. Right when he expects you to sign his paperwork. Vernon's expression carried grim approval. Timing works perfectly. And if the results confirm what I suspect, then Section 14 of your prenuptial agreement becomes a nuclear option. He forfeits everything, pays you damages, and covers all legal costs. You walk away with your full portfolio, your property, and $250,000 in compensation for being lied to. I drove home, let myself into the condo. Brent was in the shower. I could hear water running, his off-key humming of some classic rock song, the sound of someone unburdened by conscience. Standing in our bedroom, I opened the closet where his dress shirts hung beside my suits. 7 years of shared space joint decisions. Couples dinners where everyone said we were perfect together. My phone buzzed. Text from Anwen, "Lunch tomorrow, miss you." I stared at those 2 words. She'd been texting me normally this whole time, performing friendship while planning theft, asking about my day, sharing pregnancy updates, playing the role of someone who cared. I typed back, "Sorry, swamped at work. Rain check." She sent a sad emoji. I set the phone down and thought, in 10 days, I'll know everything. In 3 weeks, they'll know I know. 8 days felt like 8 years. Vernon's call came through at 2:47 on a Monday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly portfolio allocations, and the first words out of his mouth ended whatever remained of my marriage. "The geneticist's report is unambiguous," he said. "No preamble, no cushioning." Vernon understood I didn't need comfort. I needed information. Congenital azoospermia with 0 viable sperm production. But there's something else here. I closed my office door. Outside, Kendrick and Associates hummed with its usual Monday intensity phones, ringing keyboards clicking the low murmur of wealth being managed and multiplied. Inside, the world narrowed to Vernon's voice and the implications crystallizing in my mind. What else? The condition was medically documented in 2000. Mrs. Yates, he was diagnosed at 21. He's known for 24 years. Vernon's pause carried weight. He knew before he ever met you. The office was suddenly too bright. October sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Boston's financial district into a glittering grid of glass and steel. My hands were steady on my desk. My voice came out level. "You're certain?" Medical records from Mass General confirmed by 2 subsequent specialists in 2003 and 2005. This isn't a recent condition or a surprise diagnosis. This is documented, chronic, and known to the patient for his entire adult life. I thanked him, ended the call, sat in silence. Brent knew. Before the proposal at that Charleston restaurant where he'd gotten down on one knee in front of strangers who applauded. Before the wedding where his mother cried and my mother whispered doubts I ignored. Before 7 years of fertility clinic waiting rooms and calendars marked with ovulation windows and monthly disappointments, he'd watched me absorb with carefully practiced sympathy. He knew. The memories came in a cascade, each one reframed, recontextualized, poisoned retroactively. The fertility clinic visits I'd attended alone because he claimed work conflicts. He'd never submitted a sample, I realize that now, never underwent testing. Just sat beside me during consultations, where doctors gently suggested the problem might be my age, my stress levels, my declining egg quality. I'd believed them, apologized to him even, said I was sorry for being unable to give him children. How many times had I apologized for something that was never my fault? Bernice's annual Thanksgiving speech about complete women who fulfill their biological purpose. The speech she delivered while looking directly at me while Brent sat silent while I smiled through humiliation and reached for more wine. Every year, 7 years. My cousin Michelle asking loudly at last year's Christmas party if we were even trying. her voice carrying across the room, my face burning, while Brent squeezed my hand in what I'd interpreted as supportive solidarity. But he'd known. Standing there, letting me absorb public speculation about my fertility, he'd known the entire time that he was the sterile one. The fertility supplements I'd taken religiously for 3 years, expensive foul tasting, promising to optimize reproductive health. He'd bought them for me, encouraged me to take them, watched me swallow pills that did nothing because the problem was never mine to fix. The architecture of the deception was stunning in its precision. He'd built my inadequacy into the foundation of our marriage, then used it as leverage. A woman who believes she's broken tries harder, works harder, sacrifices more to prove her worth in other areas. I'd been the primary earner from the beginning, throwing myself into portfolio management, building wealth we supposedly needed because we'd never have children to inherit it. But that wasn't true either, was it? We'd always planned to have children. He'd said he wanted a family. We'd talked about names, schools, summer houses, where imaginary kids would learn to sail. Lies, all of it. I had loved a man who married me because he needed a scapegoat with a 7-figure income. The proposal itself, I saw it differently now. He'd chosen me specifically. 55 now, I'd been 48, then successful, established, visibly competent. A woman like that, he must have calculated, would be easier to convince of her own reproductive failure. A woman like that would overcompensate by being the perfect wife in every other way, supporting his non-existent consulting career, funding his mother's comfortable lifestyle, never questioning, always understanding. He'd seen me coming, targeted me, married me, then spent 7 years weaponizing my supposed infertility to keep me grateful, guilty, and paying. I locked my office door, drew the blinds, sat in manufactured darkness while afternoon sun blazed outside. For 11 minutes by my watch, I allowed myself to feel it, the full crushing weight of being deliberately, calculatedly deceived by someone I'd loved, someone I'd trusted with my body, my finances, my reputation, my future. The grief was physical, nauseating, complete. Then I stood, washed my face in the executive bathroom, returned to my desk, opened my phone and called Newton. My mother answered on the second ring. Zelda Riddle, 79 and sharp as surgical steel, had survived my father's death, 2 recessions, and my periodic failures to call often enough. She read my voice instantly. How bad is it? He knew Mom. Before we married, before he proposed, he knew he was sterile, and he let me think it was my fault for 7 years. The line went quiet. Through the phone, I heard the familiar sounds of her Newton house, the grandfather clock in the hallway, the creak of her reading chair. Then you stop mourning the marriage and start building the case, she said finally. You know how to do that. I do. Are you safe? Financially, legally, or physically? All 3. Working on it. Good girl, call me tonight. I hung up and opened my laptop. The encrypted folder labeled Project Clean Slate now contained 7 subdirectories: medical evidence, financial fraud, LLC, documentation, surveillance reports, legal strategy, witness statements. I added an 8th timeline of psychological abuse. My phone buzzed. Brent. Working late, don't wait up. I typed back a heart emoji, deleted it, typed OK instead, sent it, set the phone down. Then I called Anita Platt at her desk 3 floors down. Anita, 47, and my closest colleague at Kendrick for 6 years, would understand what I needed without requiring full explanation. I need to talk to you about something, I said when she answered. Now. The investigation phase was over. The trap building phase was about to begin. The hardest call I've ever made wasn't to my divorce attorney or my private investigator. It was to the woman who taught me that silence sometimes costs more than honesty. I didn't call, actually. I drove. Late evening, October 31st. The route from Back Bay to Newton was familiar enough that I could navigate it in autopilot, which was good because my mind was elsewhere cataloging evidence-building timelines, calculating risk. Halloween decorations lined the suburban streets, plastic skeletons, fake tombstones, inflatable ghosts glowing in the dark. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was driving to my mother's house to discuss the corpse of my marriage. Zelda Riddle's kitchen looked the same as it had for 30 years. Butcher block counters, copper pots hanging from ceiling hooks, the smell of Earl Grey tea, and something baking. She was 79 but moved with the efficiency of someone half that age. She put the kettle on before I'd even sat down. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The unlatched door, the conspiracy overheard, the LLC draining my bonuses for 18 months, the prenuptial agreement I'd written that would eviscerate him, and the medical report congenital azoospermia, diagnosed at 21 known for 24 years. 7 years of letting me believe I was broken. My mother listened without interrupting. She'd always been good at that, creating space for hard truths to be spoken. When I finished, she poured tea into mismatched mugs I remembered from childhood. "I knew something was wrong the day he proposed," she said finally. "No man that charming needs to be that charming." The words hit harder than I expected. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because you were happy. Or you looked happy." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Now I see he made you look small so he could look bigger." My mother, who raised me alone after my father left when I was 12, understood betrayal in ways I wished I didn't now share. "You stayed silent to protect me," I said. "I stayed silent because you're not a child and I'm not God. I gave you what information I could remember when I asked if you were certain about the prenuptial agreement. When I suggested you keep your finances separate, I did remember. I'd thought she was being paranoid, overly cautious from her own bad marriage. Now I understood she'd been planting seeds of protection without overriding my autonomy." "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've taken everything he tried to steal and turned it into something he can never touch again." We drank tea and ate the lemon cake she'd baked that afternoon. Outside, children's voices carried through the neighborhood, trick-or-treaters collecting candy, their biggest problems, fictional monsters, and bedtime negotiations. I envied them. November 1st dawned cold and clear. I arrived at Kendrick and Associates at 7:45, early enough that the executive floor was still mostly empty. Anita Platt's office lights were on. She'd always been an early starter, arriving before the markets opened to review overnight Asian trading. Anita Platt, 47, and my closest colleague for 6 years, closed her office door before I'd even finished saying I needed to talk. She'd been at Kendrick for 12 years, total working her way up from junior analyst to senior VP, through the same combination of competence and relentless precision I'd used. We understood each other. "I need you to know this before anyone else does," I said, sitting across from her. "My husband is attempting to commit financial fraud using my bonuses, and I'm filing for divorce." Her expression shifted from morning casual to alert. "Christ, Valerie, how long has this been going on?" 18 months for the theft, 7 years for the rest. I laid it out, the LLC called Yates Family Holdings, the systematic bonus diversion, the fraudulent transfer documents he expected me to sign, the affair with Anwin, the pregnancy that wasn't his mother's involvement in the psychological manipulation. Anita listened with the same focused attention she brought to portfolio reviews. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to know the truth before Brent tries to spin a narrative. There's a possibility he'll approach firm executives with false concerns about my work, my mental state, my professional judgment. I need someone at the VP level who knows the real story. Consider it done." She paused, then added, "Actually, there's something you should know. He tried to schedule with Thomas 2 weeks ago. My assistant brought it to me because it seemed odd spouses don't usually request CEO meetings. The cold fury I'd been managing so carefully crystallized into something sharper. "What did you do?" Stalled. Said Thomas was traveling through November. Asked if I could help instead. Brent declined, said it needed to be Thomas specifically. Anita's smile was grim. I've been in corporate finance long enough to smell sabotage prep. He was planning to discredit me before I discovered the fraud, get me fired or suspended so I couldn't fight back. Well, he failed. Anita's voice carried absolute certainty. Thomas trusts me and I trust you. If Brent tries anything corporate, he'll hit a wall. I'll make sure of it. In 30 years of portfolio management, I'd learned that the best defense is redundant, layer protection, until failure becomes impossible. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me. Just promise you'll destroy him thoroughly enough that he never tries this with anyone else." "I will." Back in my own office, I opened Project Clean Slate, added notes from both conversations, updated the timeline of psychological abuse with new revelations, created a new subdirectory corporate defense, uploaded documentation of Anita's statement about the attempted CEO meeting, along with my mother's confirmation of early suspicions. The fortress was complete now. Legal representation through Denise, investigation through Vernon, financial documentation through 7 years of meticulous record-keeping, maternal support through Zelda, corporate protection through Anita. Every vulnerability covered, every angle defended. Time to spring the traps. My phone buzzed, text from Vernon. "Bernice just called your husband. 23-minute conversation. Recording available." I looked at the timestamp she'd called him within an hour of the lab results arriving yesterday. They were coordinating. Good. Let them coordinate. I had something they didn't have. I knew they were coordinating. And tomorrow Bernice was going to call me. 4 days of waiting felt endless. Then Bernice Yates called my personal cell at 10:43 Sunday morning, and I had the recording app running before the second ring finished. I was in my living room, November sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Back Bay. Brent was at the gym, Sunday ritual he never missed. The condo was silent except for the sound of my phone ringing and my heart beating steady, controlled rhythm in my chest. I answered on the third ring, not too eager, not suspicious. "Bernice, this is a surprise. Valerie, dear, I wanted to reach out privately." Her voice carried that syrupy warmth she used when she wanted something. "I've heard there may be some difficulties between you and my son." The recording app showed a green pulse capturing every word. I kept my voice neutral, curious. "Where did you hear that Bernice—" "Oh, you know how families talk." She laughed, light dismissive. "I just wanted you to know I'm here if you need support. 7 years is a long time." 7 years. She said it like it mattered to her, like those years meant something beyond monthly deposits into her checking account. "That's kind of you to call," I said. "Well, I've always thought of you as a daughter." The lie was so smooth, I wondered if she believed it herself. These marital difficulties, they happen. The important thing is to handle them with dignity and discretion. I walked to the window phone pressed to my ear, watching traffic move along Commonwealth Avenue. Normal people having normal Sundays, none of them recording their mother-in-law's attempted manipulation. "I appreciate your concern," I said. "Between us women, dear, I think Brent is being unreasonable about the asset division." Her voice dropped to conspiratorial. "If you simply let the corporate transfers proceed quietly, I'll ensure he drops the more aggressive claims. I have influence with him, you know." There it was, the real agenda delivered with the confidence of someone who thought I was still controllable. "And what do you get from this arrangement, Bernice?" "Well, naturally, I'd need assurance that my monthly support continues. I've grown accustomed to that security you've so generously provided." She said it like it was reasonable, like betraying her own son was simply pragmatic negotiation. $2,400 a month isn't much for you, dear, but it means a great deal to me, and I can be very helpful in making sure this divorce proceeds smoothly. At what point does family loyalty become just another word for accomplice? I watched my reflection in the window, 55 years old, phone in hand, recording evidence of the woman who'd called me defective for 7 years, while cashing checks I signed with shaking hands after each humiliation. "I see," I said. "I knew you'd understand." Bernice's satisfaction was audible. "We women have to be practical about these things. Men get emotional, but we know how to protect our interests." "Tell me something, Bernice. Those holiday dinners, were they part of protecting your interests too?" A pause. Then, "I don't follow, dear. The speeches about complete women, the comments about biological purpose, the cousin you encouraged to ask loudly about our attempts to conceive." "Oh, that." She laughed. Actually laughed. "I've always maintained that a woman without children needs proper guidance. Those holiday discussions were necessary to keep you focused on family priorities." Necessary. She said it like she'd said monthly support, practical, obvious, beyond question. You mean the dinners where you called me incomplete in front of 12 relatives? Oh, don't be sensitive, dear. It was all for the greater good of securing the family line. Her tone shifted to patient, like explaining something simple to someone slow. Brent needed you focused on being a good wife. A woman who feels inadequate in one area tries harder in others. Surely you understand that. The woman who called me defective at every holiday had been cashing my checks the first of every month for 7 years. And you coordinated this with Brent? Well, naturally. A mother protects her son's interests. I advised him on how to manage the infertility situation. Keep you guilty, keep you grateful, keep you working hard to compensate. It's basic psychology, dear. She was confessing. Not bragging, not even aware she should feel shame, just explaining strategy like she was teaching me portfolio management. The recording app pulsed green, capturing every word of orchestrated cruelty delivered in grandmotherly tones. So when you said I was failing at my biological duty, I was reinforcing necessary pressure, yes, for the good of the family. She paused. But that's all in the past now. What matters is the present arrangement. You continue my monthly support, I ensure Brent accepts reasonable divorce terms, and we all move forward with dignity. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, dear. Take your time. But not too much time. These situations can become complicated if they drag on. The warmth was back saccharine and false. I'm so glad we could have this chat. Woman to woman, mother to daughter. She hung up feeling triumphant. I could hear it in her goodbye. I stood at the window for 3 minutes, phone in hand, watching my city move and breathe. Then I walked to my home office, connected my phone to the laptop, and exported the recording. 17 minutes and 42 seconds of self-incrimination, time-stamped and backed up in 3 separate locations. I opened the spreadsheet I'd created 2 days ago, 7 years of monthly payments to Bernice Yates documented with bank statements and canceled checks. $2,400 every month for 84 months. $201,600. I had financed my own systematic abuse. I saved the recording under file name Bernice-self-incrimination- November 5th.m4a and added it to the evidence folder labeled Timeline of Psychological Abuse. The file now contained transcripts of her speakerphone call with Brent Vernon's surveillance notes of their coordination, and now this Bernice's own voice explaining how she'd weaponized family dinners as psychological warfare. My phone buzzed. Text from Brent. Mom says you two had a nice chat. Glad you're being reasonable about everything. I stared at those words. He thought the call had worked. He thought I'd been manipulated into compliance. That meant he was comfortable. Comfortable enough to present the fraudulent documents soon. I opened my calendar and marked November 18th with a red star. Vernon had said it would take 2 weeks to prepare the specialty ink. That gave me exactly 13 days. Those 13 days felt like 13 years. But Saturday evening arrived exactly on schedule. Brent spread 23 pages of fraudulent documents across our dining table like a magician, revealing his final trick, and I signed every one of them with a pen that would betray him in exactly 72 hours. November 18th, 7:30 p.m. The dining room smelled like the Thai takeout we'd eaten an hour earlier, containers still scattered on the kitchen counter. He'd been cheerful all evening, more cheerful than I'd seen him in months. The documents sat in a leather folder he'd carried home from his office, treating them with the reverence of someone handling something precious. The accountant finalized everything, he said, spreading pages across the table with practiced confidence. Moving assets into the family LLC before year-end saves us $43,000 in capital gains exposure. I leaned over the documents, scanning pages with apparent interest. The language was deliberately dense subsections and whereas clauses and references to tax codes designed to confuse anyone who wasn't reading carefully. This transfers my entire Kendrick portfolio. I pointed to Section 7. All $2.8 million, only on paper, sweetheart. His voice carried that patronizing warmth he used when explaining things he thought were too complicated for me. It's still ours, just tax optimized. Trust me, I've had 3 advisors review the structure. 3 advisors who didn't exist, reviewing a structure designed to steal everything I'd spent 30 years building. The documents didn't just transfer the LLC, they gave him complete management authority over my entire Kendrick portfolio, the quarterly bonuses already diverted, and signing rights for all future financial decisions. This was more aggressive than I'd anticipated. He wasn't just stealing assets, he was attempting complete financial liquidation. My phone sat face down on the table recording app, running beneath the case. Every word he spoke was being captured with timestamp and location data. "What about the prenup we signed?" I asked, touching the page. "Does this affect those protections?" He laughed, genuine relaxed, the sound of someone who thought he'd already won. "That's about divorce scenarios. This is just smart financial planning, completely separate. So I'm signing over management authority but retaining beneficial ownership." "Exactly." He smiled, proud that I was finally catching up. "You're finally understanding how sophisticated wealth management works. The best traps are the ones your target walks into willingly," and he had just picked up the pen. "I'll need to initial here, here, and here." I pointed to the flagged sections. "And full signature on pages 6, 11, 15, 18, 21, and 23. He'd helpfully marked each spot with those little adhesive arrows lawyers use. "The notary already witnessed on my end, so your signatures complete the filing." He was so confident, he didn't even watch me read. Just sat back sipping the wine he'd poured, scrolling through his phone, like this was routine paperwork instead of attempted grand larceny. I went to my office, retrieved my Mont Blanc from the desk drawer. Except it wasn't my Mont Blanc, it was Vernon's replica, identical down to the engraved initials, but filled with specialty ink that would vaporize after 72 hours. Chemical engineering designed specifically for this purpose: rich black appearance, normal flow characteristics, standard drying time, then complete vaporization into transparent gas, leaving zero forensic trace. Vernon had called it thermochromic reactive solvent with a 72-hour molecular breakdown trigger. I called it justice with a timer. I returned to the dining room and began signing. My penmanship was careful, controlled the signature I'd used on 1,000 client documents. Valerie Yates, written in flowing script across 23 different pages. Brent watched me sign page 15. "You're not even reading the fine print." I looked up, smiled. "You've always been better with complicated financial structures. I trust your judgment." The words landed exactly as intended. His expression softened satisfaction, replacing the last traces of wariness. "That's why we make such a good team." He stood, kissed my forehead. "I'll file these with the bank Tuesday morning." Tuesday morning, the timeline I'd been waiting to confirm. The pen he watched me sign would cost Vernon $12,000 and 3 weeks of chemical engineering, worth every penny, to watch his confidence. I signed the final page, 23 signatures perfect and binding, for exactly 72 more hours. Brent gathered the documents with reverent care, placed them in the leather portfolio, carried it to his home office like he was carrying the Holy Grail. I heard the safe, open electronic beep mechanical click. The documents were secured. He returned with a bottle of champagne I didn't recognize. Dom Perignon, expensive enough that he'd clearly been planning this celebration. "To us," he said, pouring 2 glasses, "to building something that lasts." I raised my glass, met his eyes. "To getting exactly what we deserve." We touched glasses. Crystal chimed. He drank like someone who'd won. "The bank manager is expecting me Tuesday at 7:30. He said, settling onto the sofa with relaxed confidence. "By Wednesday morning, everything will be properly restructured. You won't have to worry about portfolio management anymore. I'll handle all the complicated decisions." Tuesday at 7:30. I noted the time. It was currently 8:17 p.m. Saturday. The ink would vaporize at 8:17 p.m. Tuesday, exactly 72 hours from signature, which meant Brent would arrive at the bank with 45 minutes remaining before the documents turned blank. 45 minutes for him to sit in the bank manager's office, open his leather portfolio, and discover that every signature line he'd watched me sign was now completely empty. We finished the champagne. He talked about investment strategies he'd implement, portfolio reallocations he'd make, how he'd grow our assets better than my conservative approach ever could. Every word was recorded on my phone, still running in the background. By 11 p.m., he was asleep. I stood at our bedroom window watching November rain streak the glass. Behind me, Brent's breathing had the deep rhythm of someone unburdened by conscience. I pulled out my phone and texted Denise, "Documents signed. He takes them to bank Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. File the emergency asset freeze for 6 p.m. same day." She replied immediately, "Already drafted. This is going to be surgical." I looked at the response and typed back, "It already is." The 72 hours between Saturday night and Tuesday evening felt both endless and instantaneous. At 6:03 Tuesday evening, Denise's text arrived with 2 words, "Freeze filed," and I sat alone in my Kendrick office watching the November darkness settle over Boston, waiting for the next domino to fall. My phone rang immediately after, Denise calling from the courthouse steps. "Judge Ramirez signed without hesitation," she said. "The bank compliance systems should show the freeze within 10 minutes. And the LLC, completely frozen. He can't access a single dollar of that $340,000 or your portfolio." Her voice carried grim satisfaction. "The emergency motion for asset preservation cites suspected fraud, forged documentation, and systematic financial manipulation. Court clerk stamped it at 6:04. Every joint account, every brokerage, holding the entire Yates family holding structure locked." I looked at the clock on my computer, 6:11 p.m. Brent's bank appointment was scheduled for 7:30. He'd walk in thinking he was about to complete his financial conquest, not knowing that 90 minutes earlier, a judge had frozen every asset he'd tried to steal. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see his attorney's response." She paused. "Vernon's operative is in position at the bank. Confirmed, he'll text me real-time updates. Then I'll wait to hear how it goes. This should be entertaining." I hung up and returned to the portfolio analysis I'd been pretending to work on all afternoon. Outside my window, financial district office buildings lit up against twilight, thousands of people finishing their workdays, heading home to normal lives with normal problems. I had closed 47 hostile client negotiations in my career. The key is always timing the strike before your opponent knows the battle has started. My phone buzzed at 7:41 p.m. Vernon. Manager witnessed everything, sending full report. The texts came rapid fire. Brent arrived 7:30, confident, met with branch manager Richard Caldwell. Opened leather portfolio at desk, documents spread out. Manager's face changed immediately, staring at pages under lamp. Papers appear blank, signatures illegible or completely gone. Caldwell running them under desk light, calling compliance desk. I could picture it, Richard Caldwell, the Bank of America branch manager, with 20 years of recognizing fraudulent documents, staring at blank pages under his desk lamp with professional alarm. Brent insisting they were properly signed, Saturday confusion turning to panic as every signature line showed empty or faded beyond recognition. Compliance flagged emergency asset freeze filed 6:04 p.m. Vernon texted. All accounts locked. Brent demanding to speak with supervisor. Another text. He's shouting now, security moving closer. This is not going well for him. I sat very still, phone in hand, watching the texts arrive like dispatches from a battlefield, where I wasn't present, but had planned every tactical move. Manager refused transaction, confirmed account freeze. Brent left bank 8:02 p.m. Then, parking lot. 17 phone calls in 23 minutes. First 4 attempts to Anwin Irvine. Not his lawyer, his mistress. There it was. In his moment of crisis, his first instinct wasn't legal counsel or damage control. It was calling the woman he'd been conspiring with, the woman carrying another man's baby, while claiming it was his. 4 desperate attempts before finally trying his attorney. Then Bernice, Vernon continued. Then attorney Marcus Fielding, each call more desperate. Marcus Fielding. I made note of the name. Brent had retained counsel. Call log documented. Vernon texted. He's looking for someone to blame besides himself. I typed back. He's looking for someone to blame besides himself. He just threw the portfolio against his car, documents scattered everywhere. Photographing now. The image was almost too perfect. Brent in a bank parking lot surrounded by blank papers he'd watched me sign 3 days ago, calling his pregnant mistress while his carefully constructed fraud collapsed around him. His calls came through one after another, my phone vibrating on the desk like a dying heartbeat. I didn't answer once. First call 8:47 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. Second call 8:51 p.m. Silenced. Third call 8:53 p.m. Ignored. Fourth call 9:02 p.m. I turned the phone face down and opened Project Clean Slate. I updated the timeline. 6:04 p.m. emergency asset freeze filed and activated. 7:30 p.m. Brent arrives at bank with fraudulent documents. 7:41 p.m. documents discovered blank/illegible. 7:45 p.m. asset freeze confirmed by bank compliance. 8:02 p.m. Brent exits. Bank transaction refused. 8:05 to 8:28 p.m. 17 phone calls, 4 to Anwin documented. 8:47 p.m. First attempt to contact me, ignored. I attached Vernon's photographs. Brent in the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, leather portfolio on the ground, papers scattered. His face was visible in one shot, rage and confusion and dawning comprehension that something had gone catastrophically wrong. I texted Denise and Vernon, "Excellent work. See you both tomorrow." Both replied immediately with variations of, "This is just the beginning." I closed my laptop, gathered my coat, walked through Kendrick's empty halls most people had left hours ago. The elevator descended in silence. My car was cold-engine, taking 3 tries to turn over in November chill. I drove through Financial District toward Back Bay traffic light because it was after 9 on a Tuesday. The radio played something classical I didn't recognize. At a stoplight, I looked at my phone, 2 more missed calls from Brent. I didn't listen to the voicemails. The condo was dark when I arrived. I unlocked the door to silence no sounds of someone home, no lights, no indication Brent had returned. His car wasn't in its assigned spot in the garage. I made tea, stood at the kitchen window looking out over Back Bay. Somewhere in this city, my husband of 7 years was discovering that the woman he'd underestimated had systematically dismantled every aspect of his fraud. Tomorrow would bring attorneys formal responses, escalating legal warfare. Tonight I had won. I slept in our bed alone that night. He never came home. At 6:15 Wednesday morning, I received a formal letter via process server. Brent had retained attorney Marcus Fielding and was demanding emergency mediation before Thanksgiving. I read it over coffee in perfect silence. The holidays were 4 days away. This was just beginning, and I was ready. Thanksgiving came and went in tense silence. Christmas was worse. New Year's felt like a countdown to war. The divorce petition arrived by certified mail on a bitter January morning 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, and Brent's attorney had made one critical tactical error he'd filed first, which meant I got to respond second with everything I knew. I signed for the envelope at 7:15 a.m. January 8th. The mailman looked apologetic. Certified mail before 8 always signals bad news. I carried it to the kitchen table, poured coffee, opened it with the letter opener I'd gotten as a Kendrick promotion gift 12 years ago. 42 pages. Marcus Fielding's letterhead. Suffolk County Family Court Case number stamped across the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Brent Michael Yates. Respondent Valerie Ann Yates. I read every page twice. The first time for content, the second for strategy. Brent cited grounds of emotional neglect and financial control. The petition painted me as a cold, career-obsessed wife who prioritized portfolio management over marital intimacy, refused couples counseling, and unilaterally froze joint assets without legal justification. According to Marcus Fielding's carefully constructed narrative, I was the villain controlling punitive, emotionally withholding. Paragraph 17 claimed I'd systematically isolated petitioner from financial decision-making despite his business expertise and advanced understanding of wealth management structures. Paragraph 23 alleged I'd demonstrated consistent unwillingness to address marital difficulties through professional mediation or therapeutic intervention. Paragraph 31 accused me of precipitously freezing marital assets based on unfounded suspicions, causing petitioner significant professional embarrassment and financial harm. Not one word about the LLC fraud. No mention of Anwin. Nothing about 18 months of systematic theft or 7 years of psychological manipulation about fertility. Just a portrait of an unreasonable woman who'd hurt her innocent husband's feelings and finances. I finished my coffee, made another cup, read it a third time. He'd filed first thinking it gave him control. Instead, he'd just stepped onto a battlefield where every weapon was already aimed at him. By 3 p.m., I was in Denise's conference room. She'd already reviewed the petition, marked it up with red pen in 17 places. He claims you froze assets without cause, she said, tapping paragraph 31. That gives us perfect opening to introduce the LLC fraud, the disappearing ink, the entire conspiracy. He's basically invited us to explain exactly why those assets needed freezing. What about the prenuptial agreement? We attach it as Exhibit A with the infidelity clause highlighted. She was already making notes. Then we attach Vernon's surveillance logs as Exhibits B through K. DNA report is L. Bernice's recorded confession is M. The disappearing ink lab certification is N. Financial forensics showing the systematic theft is O through T. You've thought this through. I've been thinking this through since November. She looked up, smiled. He filed first because Marcus convinced him that establishing the petitioner role would give him procedural advantage. What Marcus didn't understand is that respondent gets to counterclaim with prejudice. We spent January 10th in that conference room. Denise spread the complete evidence package across the table like a general planning a siege. DNA report proving congenital azoospermia diagnosed at age 21. Bank surveillance photographs of Brent with Anwin time-stamped and geotagged. Bernice's 17-minute recorded phone call admitting to coordinated psychological abuse. LLC formation documents showing systematic diversion of my bonuses. The specialty ink lab certification explaining the 72-hour chemical breakdown. 7 years of financial records documenting every transfer, every manipulation, every lie. Denise drafted as I organized exhibits. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, legal language flowing with surgical precision. Respondent counterclaims for dissolution based on petitioner's documented adultery, financial fraud conspiracy to commit theft, and 7 years of calculated psychological abuse regarding fertility. She typed. Include the medical records showing he knew about his condition since age 21, I said, already in paragraph 14. She didn't look up from the screen. Marcus Fielding is going to choke on his coffee when he reads this. I had spent a career building positions others couldn't dismantle. This would be no different. The counterclaim grew to 68 pages. We attached 23 exhibits. Denise demanded enforcement of the prenuptial agreement's asset forfeiture clause, plus the liquidated damages provision I'd written 7 years ago, $240,000 for documented infidelity and fraud. Paragraph 8 detailed the LLC theft with dollar amounts and dates. Paragraph 12 explained the disappearing ink trap with chemical analysis. Paragraph 18 outlined Bernice's conspiracy with direct quotes from the recorded call. Paragraph 23 presented the sterility evidence diagnosed 2002, documented in medical records before he ever met me, deliberately concealed throughout 7 years of marriage, while blaming me for our childlessness. Paragraph 28 demanded full forensic accounting of all marital finances. Paragraph 34 requested sanctions against petitioner for filing frivolous claims based on documented falsehoods. The final paragraph was my favorite. Respondent further requests. This court recognized that petitioner's allegations of emotional neglect and financial control are in fact respondent's reasonable responses to discovering systematic fraud, ongoing adultery, and calculated psychological abuse extending across the entire duration of the marriage. January 12th, 8:47 a.m. Denise personally delivered the counterclaim to Suffolk County Family Court. The clerk stamped it received. Copy was served to Marcus Fielding's office by 10 a.m. via process server, who later confirmed Marcus had personally accepted service. Denise texted me a photo of the filed stamp "Game On." I saved the image to Project Clean Slate under Legal Warfare/Filed Documents. Marcus Fielding called Denise's office at 2:17 that afternoon, 13 minutes after being served. She let it go to voicemail. At 4:30, he called again. At 5:40, a third time. Denise forwarded me the voicemail transcripts. First call, professional confusion, requesting clarification on certain allegations that seem inconsistent with petitioner's account. Second call, rising alarm, asking if respondent's counsel would be willing to discuss settlement before escalating to full litigation. Third call, barely controlled panic, requesting emergency conference before this escalates further. I texted back, "Let him panic. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for Valentine's Day. Let's see if he's still confident then." Valentine's Day arrived exactly when I'd marked it on my calendar, and Marcus Fielding looked like he hadn't slept since reading my counterclaim. The courtroom felt colder than it should have on Valentine's Day, or maybe that's just the ice radiating from Brent's side of the room as we wait for Judge Harriman to enter. Suffolk County Family Court Courtroom 4B, February 14th, 9:30 a.m. I sat beside Denise at the respondent's table case files organized in perfect order. Across the aisle, Brent sat beside Marcus Fielding, who looked haggard in expensive suit that couldn't hide his obvious stress. Brent wouldn't meet my eyes. Good. Denise leaned close, voice barely above whisper. The documentation speaks for itself. Fielding knows it. I nodded. Behind us, the gallery held maybe 15 people, mostly other attorneys waiting for their cases, a court reporter setting up equipment, Vernon Marsh, sitting 3 rows back with his familiar, observant stillness. The bailiff entered. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Harriman presiding. Judge Harriman entered a sharp-featured woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd heard every excuse a divorcing couple can manufacture. She took her seat, opened the case file that had to be 3 inches thick with our exhibits, and began without preamble. This court will now review the respondent's counterclaim and supporting evidence regarding the enforceability of the prenuptial agreement executed in 1995. Her voice carried absolute authority. "I've read both the petition and counterclaim. Mr. Fielding, your client, alleges the respondent froze assets without cause. Mrs. Shelby, your counterclaim suggests those assets needed freezing due to ongoing fraud. Let's start with the prenuptial agreement." Denise stood. "Your Honor, Exhibit A is the agreement signed by both parties in 1995. Section 14 clearly states that documented infidelity results in complete asset forfeiture by the offending spouse." "Mr. Fielding," Judge Harriman looked up. Marcus Rose cleared his throat. "Your Honor, petitioner contests the validity of certain enforcement provisions given the time elapsed since. Has your client challenged the agreement's validity before today?" "No, Your Honor, but." "Then we proceed on the assumption it's valid unless you're prepared to argue it was signed under duress or misrepresentation." She waited. Marcus said nothing. "Continue, Mrs. Shelby." Denise presented Exhibit B, a notarized letter from 2003 where Brent explicitly acknowledged the prenup's terms in writing. Exhibit C through F email correspondence over 7 years, where he referenced the agreement multiple times. Exhibit G financial records showing he'd maintained separate accounts as the prenup required. "The evidence is overwhelming," Judge Harriman said, making notes. "Mr. Yates not only signed this agreement, but repeatedly acknowledged its terms throughout the marriage. I watched each piece of evidence land like a hammer blow." Brent's face darkened. Beside him, Marcus shuffled papers with increasing desperation. "Your Honor," Marcus tried again. "We would ask for additional time to." "This court sees no ambiguity whatsoever." Judge Harriman's interruption was sharp. "The prenuptial agreement stands in full force. Mr. Yates, you will withdraw all claims to your wife's separate property, including but not limited to her investment portfolio and the Back Bay condominium acquired before marriage." My mind flashed to the notary's office in 1995. Small room, fluorescent lights. Brent signing page after page without reading. He'd looked at me afterward and said, "This doesn't mean anything, we'll never need this." I'd believed him. More fool me for thinking he'd remember promises when they became inconvenient. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence of systematic asset diversion via the LLC structure. Mrs. Shelby, these are Exhibits H through M. Correct, Your Honor. I'm ordering full forensic accounting of all marital finances. Mr. Fielding, your client will cooperate fully or face contempt charges. Marcus nodded weakly. Brent sat rigid fury radiating from him in visible waves. 20 minutes later, it was over. Judge Harriman ruled the prenup fully enforceable, ordered Brent to withdraw his asset claims, scheduled the forensic audit for March, and set the next hearing for April. Brent stormed out without a word. Marcus offered Denise a tight nod, professional acknowledgement of defeat before following his client. In the courthouse hallway, Denise allowed herself a small smile. That was about as clean a victory as we could hope for. Fielding will push for settlement now. No way he wants this going to full trial. The forensic audit will find everything. The LLC, the diverted bonuses, all of it. She touched my arm. We still need to finalize asset division details, but the hard part is done. You won. I should have felt triumphant. I felt empty. Vernon appeared at my elbow, manila folder in hand. He nodded to Denise, then lowered his voice. Mrs. Yates, I need to show you something from the Charleston surveillance. We moved to a quiet alcove near the third-floor windows. Vernon opened the folder, spread photographs across the narrow windowsill. Who is this man with her? I asked. The photographs showed Anwin at a Charleston restaurant with an older man, mid-60s, distinguished in expensive casual wear. Silver hair, confident posture, the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. But it was their body language that caught my attention, the familiar way he touched Anwin's hand, the intimate angle of their heads together, her hand resting on her visible pregnancy bump, while he smiled. This wasn't a business lunch. Lester Lockwood, Vernon said. Age 63, real estate developer, mostly commercial properties in the Southeast, worth approximately $8 million. So Anwin's been playing Brent while maintaining another relationship. Possibly. Vernon pulled out 3 more photos, different dates, different locations, same intimate proximity. Or Lockwood was there first, and Brent's the side project. I've documented 3 meetings in the past 10 days. Lockwood's been to her apartment building twice. They have the comfort level of an established relationship, not a new affair. I studied the photographs. Anwin laughing at something Lockwood said, his hand on her shoulder. The two of them walking together, his arm protective around her expanding waist. The baby, I said slowly, could be his, Vernon confirmed. Timeline would work. And if it is, then Brent wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a mark, a tool, a means to an end in a game I was only beginning to understand. I looked at the photographs again, Lester Lockwood, distinguished and wealthy, touching Anwin, with the easy ownership of someone who'd been there long before my husband stumbled into her trap. The game I was only beginning to understand required observation, not speculation. I needed air, real air, not the recycled tension of courtrooms and law offices, so I walked through the Back Bay Park on a cold Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after my legal victory, March 2nd. The trees were still bare skeletal branches reaching toward gray sky. The park was nearly empty on a day too cold for casual strolling, but perfect for someone who needs space to think. I pulled my coat tighter and followed the path along the pond. Vernon's photographs kept cycling through my mind. Anwin and Lester Lockwood, 3 meetings in 10 days. The comfortable intimacy that spoke of history, not novelty. If Lockwood was there first, what did that make Brent a target, a tool for extracting money? The question gnawed at me because it changed the narrative I'd been building. I'd thought I understood the conspiracy. Husband cheats with younger woman, tries to steal wife's money, gets caught. Simple betrayal, simple revenge. But if Anwin and Lockwood had been together before Brent entered the picture, then the affair itself was strategic, planned, executed with a specific financial goal. I walked past the playground, empty swings moving slightly in the wind. The sound of metal chains creaking was the only noise beyond my footsteps and distant traffic. Vernon's photographs showed intimacy, but what did that mean for Brent's paternity claim? If Anwen was playing Brent while maintaining another relationship, what was the end game? Extract money for a child that wasn't his used pregnancy to secure financial support from a wealthy Mark. My phone buzzed. Text from Denise. Marcus requesting settlement conference for next week. Ready to negotiate. I typed back, let him sweat another week. I want the forensic audit results first. 29 years of marriage, and I was learning the most important lessons in its final months. Trust is expensive, and verification is priceless. I rounded the curve near the pond and stopped. Two figures sat on a bench 50 feet ahead. Even from a distance, I recognized the pregnant silhouette. Anwen Irvine wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and beside her an older man with silver hair. Expensive, casual-wear cashmere sweater, tailored slacks. Lester Lockwood. I slowed my pace, moved slightly off the main path toward a cluster of ornamental shrubs that provided partial concealment. From here, I could observe without being obvious. Anwen leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. His arm was around her hand, resting protectively on her expanding belly. She was 6 months along now, maybe 7. The pregnancy was visible even through the coat. They weren't hiding. This wasn't a furtive meeting in a dark restaurant or a hotel parking lot. This was a couple comfortable enough to sit together in a public park on a Saturday afternoon. Lockwood said something I couldn't hear. Anwen laughed, tilted her face up toward his. He smiled down at her with unmistakable affection. Then he moved his hand, spreading his fingers across her belly with deliberate tenderness. Not the casual touch of a lover, something more proprietary, more intimate, fatherly. Before I tell you what that touch really meant, if you're still with me, comment A or B. A equals she should tell Brent now. B equals use it as leverage. Add one reason why in 5 to 10 words, because this changes who the real victim is. Quick note. Some details ahead are dramatized for emotional depth. The lesson is what matters. Lockwood leaned down and kissed her. Not a peck. A real kiss, possessive and tender, while his hands cradled her pregnant belly like he was protecting something precious, something that belonged to him. The baby isn't Brent's. The realization hit with absolute clarity. This wasn't an affair Anwen was conducting alongside her relationship with Brent. This was the primary relationship. Lockwood wasn't the side piece Brent was. I watched as Lockwood placed both hands on Anwen's stomach, speaking quietly. She covered his hands with hers, nodding at whatever he was saying. The body language was unmistakable. This was a father talking to his unborn child. This was a couple planning their future. Brent never stood a chance. He was the mark from the beginning. They'd targeted him deliberately. A man with a sterile, wealthy wife. A man whose ego made him vulnerable to a beautiful, younger woman's attention. A man who could be manipulated into believing he was the father of a child that would secure financial support for years. The elegance of the con was almost admirable. Anwen gets pregnant by Lockwood, starts an affair with Brent, convinces him the baby is his extracts money through child support or settlement. Meanwhile, Lockwood, worth $8 million according to Vernon's research, stays in the background providing the actual relationship and financial stability. Brent thought he was cheating on me. He didn't realize he was the one being cheated. I stood behind the shrubs watching them for another 5 minutes. They were completely comfortable, completely unguarded. Eventually, Lockwood helped Anwen to her feet, solicitous, careful with her balance. They walked away together toward the Commonwealth Avenue entrance, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. I waited until they disappeared from view before continuing my walk in the opposite direction. My mind was already calculating. This wasn't just infidelity. This was paternity fraud, attempted theft by deception, conspiracy to obtain money through false pretenses. And I'd witnessed it with my own eyes. I had proof now, not from surveillance photos or PI reports, but from my own observation. Brent had been played for a fool in ways even he didn't comprehend yet. The question was what to do with this information. Tell him the truth. Let him discover it himself when he demanded paternity testing. Use it as leverage in the divorce proceedings. I pulled out my phone and texted Vernon, confirming visual surveillance of subjects together at Back Bay Park 3:45 p.m. today. Intimate behavior consistent with your photographic evidence. Need full background on Lockwood's relationship timeline with subject. He replied within seconds, already compiling, will have report by Monday. I walked home through the cold March afternoon, my mind already 3 moves ahead. The question answered itself 6 weeks later when opportunity provided the perfect exit strategy. When my managing partner asked if I was willing to relocate to Charleston for the VP position, I realized the answer had been waiting in the back of my mind since the park. Yes, I need distance from all of this. April 15th. Thomas Kendrick's corner office, 14th floor view of the financial district I'd spent 29 years helping build. He spread architectural plans across his desk, Charleston waterfront property, new office space expansion into the southeast market. We need someone who can build the Charleston operation from the ground up, he said. You're the obvious choice. 29 years of client relationships, portfolio management expertise, and frankly, you're the only VP I trust to represent Kendrick values in a new market. When would you need me to start? Ideally, June 1st. I know that's fast, but the lease is signed and we've got 3 institutional clients ready to transfer their accounts if we can guarantee senior management presence. He paused. I heard about your divorce. If the timing's bad, the timing's perfect. Charleston, where Lester Lockwood lived, where the whole scheme probably originated. The irony wasn't lost on me escaping to the city where my husband's conspirators had built their fraud. But maybe that was exactly right. Know your enemy's territory. Understand the landscape that bred the con. I accepted the promotion that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I flew to Charleston for preliminary meetings. Kendrick had arranged for me to attend an industry conference at the Waterfront Center, networking client cultivation, establishing presence in the Southeast investment community. The conference center was all glass and steel harbor views through floor-to-ceiling windows. April in Charleston felt 10 degrees warmer than Boston, the air carrying salt, and something floral I couldn't identify. I sat through morning panels on market volatility and portfolio diversification, standard industry talk, the kind I'd heard for 3 decades. But during the ethics panel, one attendee kept asking questions that cut through the corporate language. How do you reconcile fiduciary responsibility with commission-based incentives? He asked the panelists. When client interests conflict with firm profitability, which obligation takes precedence legally versus ethically? The panelists gave evasive answers. He pressed harder, politely but relentlessly. Divorce is supposed to be an ending, but mine feels more like archaeology. Every conversation unearths another layer of deception I'd been standing on for years. At the networking reception, he was standing by the Harbor View windows. Lyle Mercer, mid-40s, Atlanta-based investment advisor with the confident bearing of someone who'd built his reputation on being right, not loud. Sharp suit, no wedding ring, the kind of relaxed confidence that came from genuine competence rather than performance. That question about fiduciary responsibility, I said, approaching with wine glass in hand. You cut right through the corporate doublespeak. He smiled. You noticed. Most people tune out during ethics panels. 29 years in the industry teaches you to recognize smokescreens. 29 years, and you're still asking the uncomfortable questions. He extended his hand. Lyle Mercer, Advisory Atlanta. Valerie Yates, Kendrick & Associates, Boston. Soon to be Charleston. The expansion. I heard about that. Bold move opening a Southeast office. We talked for 20 minutes about the Charleston market institutional clients, the difference between Boston and Southeast investment cultures. Professional conversation, easy and sharp. He asked good questions. I gave honest answers. Coffee, he suggested when the reception thinned. There's a place on the waterfront that makes decent espresso. The cafe had outdoor seating overlooking the harbor. April evening temperature dropping but still comfortable. We ordered coffee and the conversation shifted. Relocating to Charleston alone, or is family coming with you? He asked. Alone, very recently alone. He nodded, understanding in the pause. The good kind of alone or the complicated kind, the kind that's turning into the good kind. I know that transition. He stirred his espresso. Divorced 3 years ago. Atlanta to Charleston was my geographic escape, too. Did it work? Eventually. Took about a year to stop seeing the marriage in every restaurant or street corner. He met my eyes. But Charleston helped. New city, new clients, new routines. You build a life that doesn't have the old one's fingerprints all over it. It surprised me, this feeling, the possibility that I might be interesting to someone who knew nothing about my failures. Someone who looked at me and saw competence, intelligence, professional achievement instead of the wife who wasn't enough to keep her husband faithful. What brought you to Atlanta originally? I asked. Following a woman who turned out not to be worth following. He laughed. But the city was worth staying for. Sometimes the wrong reason leads to the right place. We talked for another hour. He mentioned his daughter at UGA, his mother in Tampa, his frustration with commission-based advisory models that incentivized bad recommendations. I mentioned Kendrick's fee-only structure, my portfolio management philosophy, the satisfaction of watching client accounts grow over decades. I didn't mention Brent, didn't mention the divorce beyond the initial acknowledgement. For 1 hour, I was just someone interesting having coffee with someone interesting, and the relief of that was almost overwhelming. When we said goodbye, he handed me his card. When you're settled in Charleston, if you want coffee again or dinner or just someone who knows what it's like to rebuild, call me. I flew back to Boston feeling lighter than I had in months. That lightness lasted until May 20th. I was in my office when the notification came through legal channels Anwyn Irvine had given birth to a baby girl at Mount Auburn Hospital. Standard disclosure in a divorce proceeding involving paternity claims. Vernon's text arrived 3 minutes later. Baby girl born 4:23 a.m. Mount Auburn Hospital. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Lockwood was present. Lockwood was present, not Brent. The biological father had been there for the birth while the mark remained ignorant. I opened the file I'd labeled Paternity Evidence back in January. Inside were the preliminary arrangements I'd made for DNA testing labs certified court-admissible, waiting only for the birth to proceed. Now we can prove it. DNA doesn't lie the way people do. The question was timing. Tell Brent now before the test, let him discover it when the lab results came back. Use it in settlement negotiations, present it in court as evidence of conspiracy. I texted Vernon, proceed with DNA testing per previous authorization. Lab results to me directly copied to Denise. He replied, understood. Results in 2 to 3 weeks. The baby is here, which means the DNA test I arranged 4 months ago can finally proceed. Brent thinks he's a father. Lester Lockwood knows he is. I'm the only one who holds both truths, and soon I'll have the laboratory proof to weaponize them. Margaret Holt, the court-appointed mediator assigned to our case, arranges her settlement documents with the careful precision of someone who's seen 1,000 divorces implode. Denise sits beside me, her hand resting on the folder of evidence we've spent months building. Her office on State Street overlooks Boston Harbor, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watch sailboats drift across the water. I wish I felt that calm. Instead, my heart hammers as I clutch the folder Vernon Marsh handed me 3 days ago, photographs of Lester Lockwood at the hospital on May 20th, holding a newborn with Brent's eyes and Anwyn's coloring. Thank you all for coming. Denise says, her voice professionally neutral. I know emotions are running high, but our goal today is to reach an equitable settlement that respects both parties' interests. Brent sits across from me, Bernice perched beside him like a gargoyle guarding treasure. He won't meet my eyes. Good. I don't want him to see what's brewing there. Before we begin, I say, opening my folder with deliberate slowness, I'd like to propose something. Bernice's eyebrows arch. I thought we were here to discuss marital assets, not entertain new proposals. This relates to marital assets. I slide a document across the table. I'm proposing an educational trust fund for Anwyn's baby, $800,000 to be held in trust until the child reaches 18. The silence that follows is exquisite. Brent's mouth falls open. Bernice snatches up the document, her nails clicking against the paper. Why would you do that? Brent asks. Because I'm setting a trap, I think. Because Vernon's photographs show Lester Lockwood cradling that baby with a father's tenderness. Because somewhere in the 12-page trust agreement, Bernice is scanning buried in Section 7, subsection C, is a mandatory DNA verification clause that will detonate their entire fraud. But I don't say that. Because regardless of how our marriage ends, that baby is your niece, or so you believe. I won't punish a child for the adult's mistakes. It's the truth, just not the whole truth. The baby is innocent. The baby is also evidence. Denise clears her throat. Valerie, this is extraordinarily generous. However, I want to ensure you understand the implications. I understand perfectly. I keep my voice steady. I've already spoken with my financial advisor in Charleston. The funds will come from my vested stock options, not from marital property division. Bernice looks up from the document, uncertain for the first time since I've known her. There must be a catch. No catch. Just standard trust provisions. The money is released for educational expenses once the beneficiary turns 18. Until then, it accrues interest in a conservative investment portfolio. I pause, letting the bait dangle. The only requirement is standard verification of the beneficiary's identity and relationship to the Yates family. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say, but I've learned it's also a meal that requires patience to prepare. You can't rush the marinating process. You can't skip steps in the recipe. You have to let each ingredient settle. Let the flavors develop. Let the people across from you believe they're about to feast while you're actually watching them consume their own destruction. Bite by willing bite. Standard verification. Bernice repeats slowly. She's smart enough to be suspicious, but greed is making her stupid. $800,000 is more than she expected. Birth certificate, social security number, that sort of thing, I say with a casual wave. My attorneys need to ensure the trust terms are legally binding. You understand. Brent stares at me like I've grown a second head. Val, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you want to provide for that baby's future. I lean forward. Say that even though we failed each other, we don't have to fail the next generation. He nods slowly. I can see him thinking this is proof I'm not the vindictive wife he's been painting me as in court filings. This is his redemption handed to him on expensive legal paper. If only he'd read Section 7. Denise walks us through the remaining settlement terms. I agree to keep only the assets covered by the prenuptial agreement. I don't fight for a share of the Yates Trust Fund. I don't demand alimony. With every concession, I watch Bernice's suspicion melt into relief. You've changed, Brent says when Denise steps out to make copies. Bernice has gone to the restroom, leaving us alone for the first time since Valentine's Day. Charleston is good for you. Perspective is good for me, I correct. Distance, clarity. I'm sorry for how everything happened, for all of it, for don't. I hold up a hand. What's the point of self-destruction if you can't even see the cliff you're walking toward? Let's just get through this, Brent. Let's just end it cleanly. He nods relief, washing over his features like I've given him absolution. Denise returns with the documents. 4 copies of everything, each stack precisely aligned. If everyone's in agreement, we can execute these today. Valerie's trust proposal, the asset division, the final dissolution, pending the 6-month waiting period. Bernice returns and reclaims her seat. She picks up the pen Denise offers with trembling eagerness. $800,000 for her grandniece. $800,000 that will cement the Yates legacy. She signs first, then Brent. Their signatures loop across the pages with bold confidence, the confidence of people who think they've won something. I sign last. My handwriting is smaller, neater, more careful. Section 7, subsection C requires DNA verification within 60 days of trust execution. It requires proof that the beneficiary is biologically related to Brent Yates by blood. It requires evidence that will prove Lester Lockwood not Brent fathered Anwin's baby. It requires the one thing they cannot provide without exposing everything. And when they can't provide it, the entire trust agreement becomes void due to fraudulent beneficiary claims. The settlement I just signed, the one that protects only my prenuptial assets, becomes our final divorce decree, the one that leaves them with nothing except the truth they've been hiding. "Congratulations," Margaret says, collecting the signed documents. "This concludes our settlement conference." I stand smoothing my skirt and offer Brent my hand. He takes it confused by the gesture. "Thank you," I tell him and mean it, "for making this so easy." He smiles, still clueless, still thinking I'm talking about the settlement process. I walk out of Denise's office into the June sunshine with my head high and my phone already buzzing in my purse. Vernon's name lights up the screen. The DNA test authorization is in motion. In 60 days, maybe less, everyone will know the truth. The trap is set. Now I just have to wait for it to spring. The Fairmont Copley Plaza Grand Ballroom glitters with 200 guests celebrating a baby who isn't my husband's, and I'm the only one who knows the punchline is coming. 14 days have passed since the settlement conference. Vernon's text arrived this morning at 6 DNA results, certified by Massachusetts Family Court courier delivered to my Charleston apartment. I read them over coffee while watching the sun rise over the harbor. Then I booked a flight to Boston. Now I stand near the ballroom entrance in a navy dress that cost more than it should, watching crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors. Bernice has transformed the space into a shrine to false legacy. White roses everywhere, champagne towers, a dessert table that could feed a small country. A banner reads, "Welcome to the world," in gold script above the gift table. Brent stands near the center of the room, accepting congratulations from colleagues and family friends. He's lost weight since April. The new father role doesn't fit him well. He keeps checking his phone, nodding at whatever people say without really listening. Anwen hovers nearby with the baby playing the devoted aunt, while receiving knowing glances from guests who've done the math on scandal and timing. Lester Lockwood mingles by the bar, a silver-haired man in his 60s, wearing confidence like cologne. Most guests don't recognize him. Why would they? He's just another Charleston developer, just another wealthy friend of the family, the biological father of the guest of honor hiding in plain sight. Valerie. Bernice appears at my elbow, her smile sharp as her diamond earrings. "I wasn't certain you'd come. I wouldn't miss this." I accept a champagne flute from a passing server. It's quite a celebration. Family is everything. She surveys her assembled guests with satisfaction. Despite the difficulties of the past year, we move forward. We endure. You have no idea what's about to endure, I think. At 8 o'clock precisely, Bernice taps a knife against her glass. The crowd quiets with the obedience of people accustomed to her authority. "Thank you all for celebrating this joyous occasion." She begins her voice carrying across marble and crystal. My first grandchild. A new generation of the Yates family, and I'd like to acknowledge someone whose generosity has touched us deeply. She turns to me. "Valerie has established an educational trust fund for this child. Valerie, would you like to say a few words?" 200 faces turn toward me. I step forward, champagne still in hand, and accept the microphone Bernice offers. My reflection multiplies in the mirrored walls, one woman, infinite versions, all of them smiling. "Thank you, Bernice." I pause, letting silence build. When Brent and I separated, I promised myself I wouldn't let adult failures harm innocent children. So I'm honored to establish an $800,000 educational trust fund for this baby. Every child deserves opportunity regardless of the circumstances of their birth. Applause ripples through the room. Brent's expression shifts confusion mixed with something that might be gratitude. He still doesn't understand. None of them do. The trust activates when the child turns 18. I continue. Standard provisions apply verification of beneficiary identity, proof of relationship to the Ashford family, all the usual legal requirements. I smile at the crowd. As required by Massachusetts law, the trust activation was contingent on court-certified paternity verification. Those results arrived this morning. Brent's face changes. "Valerie, what are you—" "The documents are quite detailed." I gesture to the presentation screen behind the dessert table. Vernon set this up yesterday disguised as AV equipment for a photo slideshow. I thought everyone should see them. The screen flickers to life. Court seal of Massachusetts. DNA Diagnostics Laboratory letterhead, chain of custody documentation, and then the results themselves blown up to 6 feet tall in crisp, undeniable text. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The room freezes. Someone's fork clinks against a plate. Someone else coughs. But mostly there's just the sound of 200 people reading the same impossible sentence over and over, trying to make it mean something other than what it says. The Massachusetts Family Court certified these results 3 days ago. I say into the microphone, my voice steady as bedrock. 0% probability of paternity between Brent Yates and the infant. According to the lab, it's biologically impossible. That's impossible. Brent's voice cracks across the room. There must be a mistake. The lab made a mistake. There's no mistake. I advance the slide. They ran the test 3 times. Different samples, different technicians, same result. But here's what makes it interesting. The next slide appears, a second probability calculation. Match to reference sample, Lester Lockwood. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. A woman near the front gasps, then another. The whispers start like wind through trees, building from rustle to roar. That's Lester Lockwood, someone says loudly. The Charleston developer. Why is his name on? Because he's the father. I don't shout. I don't need to. The microphone carries my words to every corner of the ballroom, every champagne-holding, diamond-wearing, scandal-hungry witness. The biological father. Verified by court-certified DNA analysis. Not Brent, never Brent. Silence can be louder than screaming when it contains the collective realization of 200 people watching someone's world collapse in real time. Bernice's champagne flute slips from her fingers. It seems to fall in slow motion, crystal tumbling through space liquid, catching light, then impact. The glass shatters against marble with a sound like a gunshot, and nobody moves. Brent, Bernice's voice breaks. What is she talking about? What does this mean? But Brent can't answer. He's staring at the screen, at the numbers, at the impossible truth displayed before 200 witnesses. His mouth opens, closes, opens again. Anwen grabs the baby and runs. Just turns and flees toward the service exit heels, clicking against marble, the infant wailing as she moves. Lester Lockwood follows, not running, but walking with purpose, toward the same exit, a man who knows exactly when a party is over. It means the trust fund is void, I say, into the microphone, answering Bernice's question since her son can't. Paternity fraud voids the settlement agreement. Every signature, every concession, every generous gesture void, because you can't establish a trust fund for a Yates heir when the baby isn't a Yates at all. I set down the microphone carefully, the small thunk of metal against wood, echoing through absolute silence. 29 years. I say, though, now I'm not using the microphone, and maybe only the people closest to me can hear. 29 years of lies, destroyed in one court-certified document. I walk toward the exit through a parted sea of witnesses. Nobody stops me. Nobody speaks. They just stand there, 200 people holding champagne and watching the wreckage of a family implode under the weight of its own deception. The trap didn't just spring, it detonated. The silence shatters when Brent lunges toward Anwen, his voice cracking the refined atmosphere like a gunshot. You lying bitch, you told me that baby was mine. Wah! I'm 3 steps from the exit when the explosion happens. I stop, turn back. This is worth watching. Brent's face has gone purple, veins standing out on his neck, like rope under tension. He's on the stage now, where the microphone still rests on its stand, where the DNA results still glow 6 feet tall on the presentation screen. His hands shake as he points at Anwen, who's backed against the dessert table, clutching the infant. I left my wife for you. His voice echoes off marble and crystal, bouncing through the frozen ballroom. I was going to support that child. Everything I did, everything I destroyed was because you said that baby was mine. The controlled divorce attorney I married 29 years ago has evaporated. What remains is a man stripped bare before 200 witnesses, humiliation replacing every carefully constructed facade. This is Brent Yates, without his armor, gullible, betrayed, and only now realizing how thoroughly he's been played. Anwen shifts the baby to one arm, holding up her other hand like a shield. "Brent, please not here, we can talk." Talk. He's screaming now, spittle flying. "You committed fraud. You made me believe I was a father. You destroyed my marriage, my reputation, everything for what for him." He wheels toward Lester Lockwood, who's moved closer to the stage with the slow inevitability of someone who knows the game is over. Lester's face remains composed, but his body language betrays him. The way he angles toward Anwen, protective and possessive. The way he watches the infant in her arms, paternal. "The lab made a mistake," Anwen says, but her voice cracks on the lie. "These tests aren't always accurate." Massachusetts Family Court Certification. A woman near the front speaks up, her voice carrying through the silence. "Those are 99.9% accurate. I'm a medical researcher. There's no mistake." Anwen's face crumbles. "I thought you were the father, Brent. I swear I thought—" "You thought—" Brent laughs a sound like breaking glass. "You thought or you lied because those are different things, Anwen. Those are very, very different things." Guests murmur, heads turning toward each other, the scandal metabolizing in real time. I recognize several of Bernice's book club friends, 3 members of Brent's firm, at least a dozen people whose social circles overlap with ours, with mine and Brent's, from when there was a mine and Brent's. They're watching the show with the transfixed horror of people who know they'll be retelling this story for years. "I loved you," Brent says, and now his voice breaks completely. "I actually loved you. I thought we were building something. I thought—" He stops because Lester has reached Anwen. The older man places a hand on her shoulder, and the gesture, tender, familiar, possessive, tells the entire story the DNA report already confirmed. This isn't a friend comforting a friend. This is a father protecting the mother of his child. "Is that Lockwood?" someone shouts from the back. "The Charleston developer, he's the father." Lester meets Brent's gaze across 10 feet of marble stage. His silence is its own confirmation. "You knew." Brent's voice drops to something hoarse and dangerous. "You knew the whole time, and you let me. You watched me fall in love with her. Watched me destroy my marriage. Watched me plan a life around that baby, and you knew." "We should leave," Lester says quietly. "This isn't the place." He's not even denying it. The same woman from before, the medical researcher, speaks loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He's the father. This was planned. This was a conspiracy." The word ripples through the crowd like contagion. Conspiracy. Not just an affair, not just a mistake, but a deliberate, calculated fraud. I watched the man I married for 29 years dissolve into a stranger, standing alone on a stage, while his entire world rewrites itself around him, and I feel nothing but the cold satisfaction of a debt finally paid. Brent opens his mouth to respond, but Bernice's voice cuts through the chaos. "I had no knowledge of any of this." Everyone turns. Bernice stands near the champagne tower, her posture rigid, her face composed into the expression of wounded dignity she's perfected over 6 decades. She addresses the room, not her son. "I was told the child was my grandchild." She continues projecting to the back row like an actress hitting her mark. "I had no reason to question paternity. I am as shocked as anyone in this room." "Mother." Brent stares at her. "What are you—" "I cannot be associated with fraud." She says it calmly, definitively, the way she might announce she's changing her dinner reservation. "I had no involvement in whatever deception occurred here tonight. I'm as much a victim as anyone." What does it say about Bernice Yates that she can abandon her son in under 10 seconds when her reputation is threatened? "You're disowning me." Brent's voice cracks on the word. "Right now, in front of everyone." I'm clarifying my position. Bernice adjusts her diamond bracelet, a small gesture that draws the eye that says she's still in control. "I cannot allow anyone to think I was complicit in paternity fraud or trust fund manipulation. My reputation in this community—" "Your reputation." Brent laughs again, that broken glass sound. Your reputation, I'm standing here publicly destroyed, and you're worried about your reputation. Yes, she says it simply without apology. I am, and everyone here understands why. The murmurs shift. Some guests nod. They understand. In certain circles, reputation isn't just currency, it's oxygen. And Bernice Yates has just decided her son isn't worth suffocating for. I think we should all leave, Bernice announces to the room. This celebration is obviously concluded. Thank you for coming. She walks toward the exit. Not the service door Anwen fled through, but the main entrance, head high, shoulders back. She passes within 3 feet of me without making eye contact. 200 witnesses watch a mother choose her social calendar over her child, and half of them look like they'd make the same choice. Brent stands alone on the stage, the DNA results still glowing behind him, his entire life detonated and scattered across marble floors. I didn't orchestrate that betrayal. Bernice's ruthlessness is entirely her own, but I'm not above appreciating the symmetry. I walk to the microphone while chaos swirls around me, and 200 people fall silent because they sense I'm not finished. Brent is still on stage, though. Bernice has already disappeared through the main exit. Guests hover near tables and doorways, uncertain whether to stay or flee. The DNA results still glow on the presentation screen like a monument to fraud. I pick up the microphone with steady hands. Before everyone leaves, I say, my voice cutting through the murmurs, there's one more truth this room should know. Brent's head snaps up. Valerie, don't... You forfeited privacy when you committed fraud, Brent. I meet his eyes across the stage. This matters. He's shaking his head, but he doesn't move. He knows he's already destroyed. Whatever I say now is just cataloging the wreckage. I pull a manila folder from my purse, the second folder, the one Brent himself submitted to the court as part of his own divorce filings attempting to claim medical hardship. Medical records, Boston Fertility Clinic letterhead, 3 separate specialist consultations, all dated 2017. In March 2017, my husband consulted Dr. Raymond Fisher at Boston Fertility Clinic. The diagnosis was azoospermia, the complete absence of viable sperm. Medically, biologically, permanently sterile. Someone gasps. I don't look to see who. He consulted 2 additional specialists for second and third opinions. Dr. Sarah Mendez, Dr. James Kowalski. All 3 confirmed the same diagnosis, 0 viable sperm, medically incapable of fathering children. Brent's face has gone white. You had no right to... I had every right during divorce discovery. I hold up the documents. These are court-obtained medical records legally subpoenaed. And here's what matters: for 7 years after that diagnosis, Brent let me believe I was the reason we had no children. The silence feels like pressure against my eardrums. 7 years, I repeat. He knew. He's always known. And he let me carry the guilt. Let me endure the questions from family and friends. Let me wonder what was wrong with me while he sat on medical proof that I was never the problem. Bernice reappears in the ballroom entrance. She must have heard my voice from the lobby. Her face is a mask of shock. Brent, is this true? Her voice cuts across the ballroom. He doesn't answer. His silence is its own confession. So when he told you all that Anwen's baby was his... I continue addressing the room. When he destroyed our marriage to play father to that infant, he was lying about biological impossibility. He couldn't have fathered that child any more than he could have fathered mine. But he knew Anwen's baby would inherit Ashford money and status. He knew it would secure his position in his mother's will. So he pretended. That's not... Brent starts, but his voice breaks. Pretended to be a father, I say. Pretended the child was his. Pretended Anwen chose him. When really this was always about Lester Lockwood's conspiracy, and you were just convenient cover. The weight of it settles over the ballroom like snow. 200 people absorbing the full architecture of the fraud. Anwen and Lester needed a Yates surname for their child. Brent needed a baby to secure his inheritance. Both sides using each other, both sides lying, and me cast as the obstacle to be discarded. There's one more thing, I say, and now I allow myself to smile. The trust fund I established $800,000 voided tonight due to paternity fraud isn't going back into my stock portfolio. Brent's eyes narrow. Even in ruin, he's calculating. I'm redirecting those funds to establish a scholarship program, the Valerie Riddle Scholarship Fund for women over 50 pursuing post-divorce career advancement. Educational grants, professional development certification programs, whatever they need to rebuild lives after betrayal. A woman near the front starts clapping, then another. Within seconds, half the ballroom is applauding, and I see tears on some of their faces. These are Bernice's friends, Brent's colleagues, our social circle, and they're applauding my dismantling of everything the Ashford name represented. Every woman who benefits will know the funding came from exposing fraud and refusing complicity in lies. I say into the microphone, something meaningful built from the wreckage of something rotten. The applause continues. Brent stands frozen on stage, a man watching his destruction become someone else's inspiration. I set down the microphone carefully, the small click as it settles onto its stand, marking the end of something, the end of 29 years. The end of being Valerie Yates, my ex-husband's dutiful wife. The end of making myself smaller to fit someone else's lies. Walking out of that ballroom feels like shedding a costume I've worn so long I forgot it wasn't my skin. Guests part as I move toward the exit. I don't hurry. I don't look back at Brent or Bernice or anyone else still frozen in the wreckage. They're already history, already chapters I've closed and archived. Good for you, Valerie, someone says as I pass, an older woman I recognize from Bernice's charity galas. Good for you. I nod, keep walking. The lobby is cooler than the ballroom, the marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Through the glass doors, I see Copley Square bathed in June twilight, the Trinity Church spire, dark against a purple sky. My phone buzzes. Lyle's name appears on the screen. Flight tomorrow, still on dinner reservations at 7. I text back, confirmed. See you in Charleston. Charleston. The VP position. The Harbor View office. Lyle Mercer with his easy laugh and uncomplicated affection. The scholarship program I'll spend the next year building. My mother Zelda, who called me this morning to say she's proud of me for the first time in 3 decades. 29 years of marriage ending not with tears, but with 200 witnesses watching me choose myself. I push through the glass doors into the June night. The air smells like car exhaust and summer and possibility. I'm 55 years old, newly divorced, professionally successful, and more myself than I've been since I was 26, and thought marrying Brent Yates meant building something real. The most powerful revenge I realize as I walk toward the taxi stand wasn't the DNA revelation or the public humiliation or even the sterility exposure. I forgot relationships could be uncomplicated. It was becoming free. Behind me, the Fairmont Copley Plaza glitters with lights and scandal and the sound of 200 people who will never forget what they witnessed tonight. Ahead of me, Charleston waits. I don't look back. Brent's name appears on my phone screen 5 weeks after the Fairmont catastrophe, and for 3 rings I consider whether his humiliation is even worth acknowledging. I'm in my Charleston office, 10th floor, Harbor View, Vice President nameplate still gleaming when the call comes through. July heat shimmers off the water. I pick up on the 4th ring. Valerie, please. His voice sounds hollowed out. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to hear me out. You have 3 minutes. I swivel my chair to face the harbor. I'm busy. I was manipulated. Anwyn and Lockwood, they targeted me. I see that now. They used my relationship with Mother, the inheritance concerns. They knew exactly how to... 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Please, you and I, we had 29 years. That has to count for something. We can rebuild from this. I've been seeing a therapist. I understand now what happened, how I was victimized. Victimized. I repeat the word like I'm examining a specimen. Is that what you're calling it? They conspired against me. The whole paternity fraud, I believed that baby was mine, Valerie. I believed. You believed what was convenient to believe. A sailboat cuts across the harbor outside. You lied about being sterile for 7 years, Brent. Anwyn didn't make you do that. You knew you couldn't father children and you let me carry the guilt anyway. Silence on the line. Then, I was ashamed. I made mistakes, but we had 29 years. We had 29 years of you choosing convenient lies over uncomfortable truth. 29 years of you making me smaller so you could feel bigger. 29 years of gaslighting about fertility, fidelity, reality itself. My voice remains calm, clinical. I'm done. I'm offering you a chance to take you back so you're not alone with consequences, provide cover, so Boston society stops whispering about the man who got conned by his mistress. I pause. The answer is no. Valerie, I'm begging. Don't. Begging is beneath both of us. You made your choices. I made mine. We're done. The divorce is final. I hang up before he can respond. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. More time than he deserved. How do you reconcile with someone who spent 7 years lying about sterility and letting you believe you were broken? The answer is simple, you don't. 2 hours later, my mother calls from Newton. Zelda's voice carries satisfaction. The decree is entered, she says, without preamble. Suffolk County Family Court. Everything you're entitled to, plus the judgment for his fraud complicity. I pull up my laptop, refreshing email. The LLC, too. He tried to hide that for 18 months. Vernon's documentation was thorough. The judge added punitive damages for the concealment attempt, $240,000 for legal fees and fraud-related damages. The email appears, final decree of dissolution. I open it. Walk me through the assets, I say. Full ownership of the Back Bay condo, $1.9 million. Complete investment portfolio, $2.8 million. The hidden LLC containing $340,000, plus the $240,000 judgment against him personally. Zelda pauses. $5.28 million plus punitive damages. Judge Harriman noted that Brent's participation in the paternity fraud scheme constituted grounds for asset forfeiture beyond prenuptial protections. I scan the decree. The language is formal, definitive, marriage dissolved, assets divided, judgment entered in favor of petitioner. 29 years reduced to legal paragraphs. He called this morning, I say. Wanted to reconcile. Zelda's laugh is sharp. Before or after he knew about the decree? Before. He was calling from Marcus Fielding's office. Probably found out about the final judgment right after hanging up with me. The timing is almost poetic. The timing is almost funny. I scroll through sections, property division debt allocation spousal support, denied per prenuptial agreement, fraud findings, and punitive award. He spent 3 minutes blaming Anwin and Lockwood. Zero acknowledgement of the sterility, lies, the gaslighting, any of it. He's learned nothing. He's learned nothing. I agree. Zelda's voice softens. How do you feel? I look at the document on my screen. Certification stamps. Judge's signature. Suffolk County Family Court seal. My name, Valerie May Riddle, FKA Valerie May Yates, reclaiming my maiden name in legal text. Free, I tell her. Freedom, I'm learning, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in the quiet moment when you sign a legal document and realize you're no longer tethered to someone else's choices. I download the decree print, a copy sign the acknowledgement form. My signature looks different than it did 30 years ago, firmer, more certain. The loops and curves belong to someone who knows exactly who she is. The marriage is over, not just emotionally or practically, but legally, formally, irrevocably. Dissolution effective, July 22nd, 2024, 29 years, 7 months, 12 days finished. I place the signed acknowledgement in an envelope addressed to Suffolk County Courthouse. Tomorrow I'll mail it. But really, the ending happened 5 weeks ago in a ballroom full of witnesses. This is just paperwork confirming what everyone already knows. My phone buzzes. Lyle's name appears. Dinner tonight celebrating something or just celebrating. I text back, celebrating freedom. Pick you up at 7. Outside my window, Charleston Harbor stretches toward the Atlantic. The sailboat has disappeared beyond the horizon, sailing somewhere new. I watch the water shimmer and feel the quiet certainty that what I'd spent 7 years doubting my worth, my capacity, my judgment had never been in question. No revenge fantasies left to fulfill, no scores left to settle, no husband to manage or mother-in-law to appease or lies to navigate. Just me, my Harbor View office, my vice president title, my scholarship fund waiting to be built, and a man who makes me laugh without making me smaller. The decree sits on my desk, 23 pages of legal termination. I don't file it away. Not yet. For now, I just want to look at it. This document that transforms 29 years of marriage into past tense, this certification that what was destroyed at the Fairmont wasn't just Brent's reputation, but my imprisonment in a life that never fit. I'm 55 years old, newly single, professionally successful, and lighter than I've been in 3 decades. The marriage is legally dead, the assets are secured, and Brent's pathetic reconciliation attempt proves he'll never understand what he destroyed. What remains isn't revenge or vindication. It's the strange lightness of a life that's finally completely mine. Free. Standing at the podium in Boston University's administration building in September, I'm announcing a scholarship program funded by my ex-husband's attempted fraud, and the irony feels like poetry. The divorce decree arrived 2 months ago. The money-voided trust fund reclaimed from paternity fraud sat in escrow while attorneys finalized the transformation. Now it's real, the Valerie Riddle Scholarship Fund, endowed with $800,000, supporting women over 50 pursuing post-divorce education and career advancement. This program exists because one man's betrayal revealed a larger truth. I tell the assembled administrators and donors, divorce at 50 plus doesn't mean endings. It means women rebuilding lives with hard-won wisdom and second-chance courage. This fund supports their education certification programs, professional development, whatever they need to transform crisis into opportunity. Applause fills the room. My mother Zelda sits in the front row wearing pride like armor. She flew in from Newton this morning, insisted on being here for what she calls my triumph. I call it closure. Afterward, Zelda and I walk through Commonwealth Avenue in afternoon sun leaves, turning gold and crimson overhead. You could have kept that money, she says quietly. Built a bigger nest egg, bought property, anything. Instead, you're changing lives. Keeping it would have meant Brent still had power over it. This way, it's mine to give away. I watch students hurry past with backpacks and coffee cups. Every woman who benefits will know it came from refusing to accept lies. That matters more than wealth. Zelda squeezes my arm. You're different. Not just divorced, transformed. She's right. The woman who stood in a Commonwealth Avenue hallway a year ago overhearing her own betrayal through a cracked door wouldn't recognize who I've become. I fly back to Charleston that evening. Lyle meets me at the airport with coffee and a smile that doesn't ask for anything except my company. October arrives with cooler temperatures and the comfortable rhythm of a relationship built on honesty instead of strategy. Lyle and I fall into patterns, weekend walks along the Battery dinners, at the bistro on King Street. Sunday mornings, reading newspapers on my Harbor View balcony. He talks about his investment clients, the satisfaction of helping retirees secure their futures. I talk about the VP role, the challenge of managing regional portfolios, the surprise of actually enjoying corporate leadership when it's not shadowed by domestic crisis. I'm not trying to fix anything, he says one Saturday as we walk the waterfront. You're not broken. 29 years with someone who needed me damaged, I say. I forgot what it feels like to be whole on my own. Then I'll wait until you remember. It's such a simple statement, but it rewrites something fundamental. Brent needed me diminished to feel large. Lyle needs nothing except my authentic presence. Recovery, I'm learning, doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives in the small shock of realizing you haven't thought about your ex-husband in 3 days. November brings Thanksgiving, which I spend with Lyle's sister's family in Savannah. Normal holiday chaos, children arguing over board games, dogs begging for turkey scraps, adults debating politics with warmth instead of warfare. His sister Maria pulls me aside while clearing dishes. He's different with you, she says. Lighter, real. I'm different with him, I admit. I forgot relationships could be uncomplicated. By December, Charleston wears Christmas lights like jewelry. The The harbor reflects red and green, the church steeples glow white against dark sky. Lyle and I share dinner at a waterfront restaurant on a Thursday evening, the kind of unremarkable weeknight that somehow matters more than grand occasions. "I'm not asking for promises," he says over wine and low candlelight. "I'm asking if you can imagine a future where someone shows up for you the way you deserve." I consider the question seriously. 6 months ago, I was signing divorce papers and feeling the strange lightness of freedom. Now I'm sitting across from a man who makes me laugh, who respects my boundaries, who treats partnership like collaboration instead of conquest. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine anything but revenge, I say. Now I'm sitting here imagining partnership. That's a good start. Dating after divorce is like learning a language you forgot you spoke. The grammar feels foreign until suddenly it doesn't. "I'm 55, I say. I spent 29 years married to someone who made me smaller. I'm not interested in repeating that pattern." "I'm 47, he counters. "I spent 10 years married to someone who needed constant validation I couldn't provide. I'm not interested in repeating that either." We look at each other across the table, two people carrying different scars but similar wisdom. "So what are we interested in?" I ask. "Showing up honestly, building something real, not rushing." He reaches across the table and I take his hand, seeing where this goes without needing to control the destination. What I hadn't expected in all the months of strategy and evidence gathering was this, that after the trap was sprung and the assets were secured and the decree was signed, what remained wasn't triumph. It was just ordinary Tuesday evenings with someone who told me the truth. The revenge was just clearing space for real life. "I think I can do that," I tell him. After dinner, we walk the waterfront streets. December air carries salt and pine Christmas lights strung between lampposts, casting warm pools on cobblestones. Lyle's hand is warm in mine, and the contact feels natural instead of calculated. "You're smiling," he says. "What are you thinking?" "That I spent 29 years married to the wrong story. I'm ready to write a new one." This is what winning looks like, not the courtroom victory or the public humiliation or the financial settlement. It's the quiet certainty that my life belongs to me. It's walking through Charleston in December with someone who sees me whole. It's the scholarship helping women I'll never meet. It's my mother's pride. It's my Harbor View office where I make decisions without second-guessing myself. It's being 55 and knowing exactly who I am. Charleston lights reflect on the harbor, and Lyle's hand is warm in mine. And for the first time in decades, I'm not planning 3 moves ahead or protecting myself from betrayal. I'm just here, 55, and free writing the next chapter of a life that's finally completely mine. Brent is background noise somewhere in Boston dealing with consequences I no longer care to monitor. Anwyn and Lester Lockwood are footnotes in someone else's scandal. Bernice's social standing isn't my concern. What remains is this salt air warm hand, Christmas lights on water, and the profound peace of knowing I chose myself. I chose myself and everything else followed. Dr. Morrison's expression shifts from routine to careful attention as she reviews my blood work, and I brace myself for whatever complications a 55-year-old body might produce. The appointment was supposed to be simple. I'd been tired for weeks, vaguely nauseous, chalking everything up to Charleston humidity and the sustained adrenaline of the past 14 months. My physician ordered comprehensive labs just to be thorough. Now she's looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. "Your HCG levels indicate pregnancy," she says, setting down the printout. "Approximately 8 weeks." The words don't connect. I hear each one individually hormone-elevated pregnancy 8 weeks, but strung together they form impossible syntax. "That's not possible," I say. "I'm 55. My ex-husband and I consulted specialists for years. I was told conception was unlikely." "What were you told specifically?" I try to remember. Brent scheduled every appointment. Brent interpreted every result. Brent delivered every verdict. That we had fertility challenges, multiple factors, that the issue was complex. Dr. Morrison pulls up the ultrasound system. "Your hormone panels suggest very late perimenopause, rather than full menopause. There are documented cases where ovulation occurs unexpectedly in this window. Rare, but real. I'd like to confirm with imaging. The ultrasound takes 10 minutes. A grainy image resolves on the screen, abstract curves and shadows gradually forming something recognizable. Dr. Morrison points to a small, flickering point. Heartbeat, she says, strong and steady. I stare at the screen at the evidence of what Brent spent 7 years telling me could never exist. After she leaves me with paperwork and follow-up cards, I sit in the empty exam room and feel the weight of it settle differently than anything has before. Not victory, not vindication. Something quieter and more permanent than either. He knew in 2017. 3 specialists confirmed congenital azoospermia, 0 viable sperm, permanent sterility. He let me absorb 7 years of blame for something that was never my failure. Every month, I didn't conceive he had evidence I was the problem. Except I wasn't. He was lying. I text Lyle, "Can you meet me at Battery Park? Need to talk." His response is immediate: on my way. Late afternoon sun angles across Charleston Harbor when he arrives. He sits beside me without pushing, without performing concern, just present, just waiting. "I'm pregnant," I say. 8 weeks at 55. He's quiet for a long moment. Then, "How do you feel about that?" It's such a Lyle question, not what he feels, not what I should feel, just asking what actually is. Like something that was taken from me has been returned, I tell him. Brent spent 7 years letting me believe I was broken. I wasn't. I never was. Lyle's hand finds mine. We sit with that for a while, the sailboats, the salt air, the ordinary miracle of an evening that has nothing to do with betrayal or courtrooms or disappearing ink. At 55, I am pregnant-free and more myself than I have ever been. Brent built his entire deception on the assumption that I would never discover what he knew. The prenup, the LLC, the portfolio, and when the baby, every layer of the scheme required me to remain blind. I was not blind. I was just waiting for the moment to look. The sun drops toward the harbor, painting the water, amber and rose. Lyle's arm comes around my shoulders and Charleston breathes around us. Ordinary, complicated, beautiful. This is not a revenge story. Revenge implies I needed him to lose in order to win. I didn't. I just needed to stop letting his lies define the boundaries of my life. And to you listening to my story, remember this. What I know now is this. The day you stop needing revenge is the day you've already won. Looking back, I see my mistakes clearly. I spent years accepting blame that wasn't mine, carrying guilt for someone else's lies. Don't make my mistake. Don't let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their version of reality. The moment you start doubting yourself is the moment they win. Trust your instincts even when everyone says you're wrong. What I learned is that revenge-cheating stories aren't really about revenge. They're about reclaiming truth. When someone betrays you, the temptation is to become bitter, to let their cruelty reshape who you are. But real justice isn't about punishing them. It's about refusing to carry their lies. I believe God put me through this journey to show me I was stronger than I knew. The pregnancy at 55 wasn't coincidence. It was proof I was never the failure He needed me to be. If you've stayed until the end, I'd love your thoughts. Have you experienced revenge-cheating stories in your own life? Drop a comment and share your perspective. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Her Vengeance for more stories like this. Thank you for staying until the very end. One final reminder, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling, but the core message about truth vindication and reclaiming your life is what I hope stays with you.